All right, so here we are with, I guess this will be episode 5 of the fake Untitled podcast. And now we've got both Steve and Craig. Hey, guys.
What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm
So,
with my people. It's amazing.
good times.
I have a deeper appreciation and understanding of my life.
Shit,
Although
you
Craig
aren't
kind of
hiring,
scares
right?
me, man. Craig scares me. He makes me realize how much knowledge there is in chemical engineering that I don't know. I closed that door and I don't want to open it again, and it's scary.
Yes, welcome back.
No. Bad door.
Don't forget you're here for life.
Oh. Man, as long as you don't dive into PChem, I'm okay. Because PChem is an abomination that should
I love
never,
PChem.
the rest of the world should just be insulated from that, and nobody should be exposed.
Dude, I've one of my big things is so you know how math is just a language, so I'm more of a poet in that language than I am in English. So I love PChem just from the way that you can use a lot of group theory to manipulate a lot of the structures in it, from the math standpoint.
Lies. All lies. Everything about PChem is bad.
Well, quantum chem is also PChem. You have to remember that.
Yeah.
And PChem 2 at university was quantum chem. How about that?
Okay, that's fair.
Okay.
But PChem 1 was terrible. And
PChem 1 is thermo, and thermo is an abomination, yes. But thermo is there's 5 courses in thermo you do in chemical engineering.
And let's be entirely honest, I'm pretty sure that quantum mechanics is where we start to dig into satanic cults, because as soon as you start invoking pitchforks in your equations, there is no good use except to summon Satan.
Hey.
I see no practical purpose beyond.
Why do you think Maxwell had a demon?
I'm really okay with believing that, Schrodinger and his cat being this whole entire thing is because he looked into the darkness and said, no, I'm not going there.
Did he have a pointy hat on though? That was
he did have a pointy. It's tinfoil, in fact.
Well, one of the early rocketry guys here in America was a big occultist, and they've pretty much tried to bury that.
Oh, it's amazing. So it's actually great. As much as Neil deGrasse Tyson has kind of gotten into his fame in recent years, he had a great discussion at one of his little plenary talks where he was discussing the kind of the limit when a scientist reaches the limit of their ability to really delve into the unknown, when they kind of seek for the supernatural and give up on the drive for a natural explanation, so the God of the gaps kind of thing. And that was that's one of those things where you have these very crazy smart people that will go through their career, and eventually the end terminus comes out to be about the same, where they end up saying there has to be something more, and it's about the point where they've exhausted their drive to reach further, and then the next generation comes along and just plows through the barrier that they set up themselves.
Well, I've got a personal theory on gravity, right? Because I hate that theory. I hate anything that requires invisible magical matter to make it work. Invisible magical matter that we haven't detected, that we can't detect, but they're absolutely sure it exists, because that makes the equation works. Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. So if you're talking about lambda then in the equation.
Oh,
okay.
so a matter of the gaps, as it were.
It is a matter of the gaps.
Otherwise called WIMPs, right?
Well, you can call it whatever the hell you want. I call it magical wave of the hands, right? It just makes the equation work. It's not something that we've actually demonstrated exists, but we make the equation work. And what really pisses me off is they dive into this stuff and they're like, "Oh, look, this proves it." And you're like, "No. The whole reason that you created that concept was the same thing that you're demonstrating there." There was a study not too long ago that was like, see, we've proven dark matter exists because of the rotation of the galaxies. Well, if you go back to Orr's work back in 1930. Right, that's basically what he said. He said the galaxies rotate too fast, so there's got to be some more mass there. That doesn't work.
So the thing is, you're correct about the cart being put before the horse. There, they have the statement the wrong way around. But of course, it is also the way that we drive with hypothesis experimental work. It's the whole reason we have the LHC right now, is because we were looking for the Higgs boson because it was suggested by the math, and we did find a Higgs-like phenomenon. Whether or not pseudo-scalar or if it's a scalar, so it could be, for those not quite figuring out what that means, a scalar is just a number a pseudoscalar is like when you have two vectors dotted together so they become a single value, a scalar value. Or it could be like two matrices double dotted together, et cetera, et cetera. So if it's multiple values that become one, it's a pseudoscalar. If it's a scalar, then it's just a value.
But the Higgs boson also just proves that mass is like an energy construct, right?
So
it doesn't actually prove that dark matter exists.
No, so yeah, right? It has nothing to do with dark matter.
Right.
But the point was that the equation that was written down by Higgs on the back of a friggin' envelope, or napkin rather, literally at the back of the napkin, coffee and biscuits discussion became the LHC, and this guy got to see in his lifetime this thing happen. And that's the way science is supposed to work, where you come up with the hypothesis, you explain the requirements for experimental work to actually prove or disprove, and then you set about doing it. Yep. Whereas the dark matter stuff, for one thing, it's really hard to come up. It's really hard to make a new universe, or let alone some to do experiments. So we've kind of got the one we're in, and you have to look for experimental observations you can make. Now, the one great one that they have for dark matter that does convince me that there's something, whether or not it's just like dust we can't see is a big question here. But there's something, is that one where the two galaxies collided and you can see the gravitational lensing.
So
you know the one I'm talking about, and what I'm saying is
yes,
you can see the lensing effect.
So first off, right, but that doesn't prove that there is dark matter. It just proves that two supermassive objects interacting with each other will produce a wave effect.
So all I'm saying is that there's gravity there. I'm not saying what's causing it, but I'm saying that because the two materials are so light, they're so less not dense, that they're able to basically pass through each other. And because the gravity effect exists where the mass that was collisionless should exists there, means that there's something there causing a gravitational effect. That is not the visible mass that passed the other way.
Or it's some other effect that's resultant from an emergent phenomenon. That's actually where I go with my hypothesis.
Sure.
And I dive into that as it's derived from the structure of matter, and I can actually predict dark matter exactly, like 3 decimal places, 4 decimal places.
Oh, that's okay. I gotta stop you there because 3 decimal places is government work, 6 is the private sector, and then 12 is science.
Okay, well, you know what? I don't have a supercomputer at my command.
Okay.
I'm okay with being really, really, really close. And plus,
I just wanted to go ahead and point that one out.
First off, 12 doesn't count because if you start using actual programs to calculate, they only go out to like 17, and then it's all rounding errors. And so that was actually a problem that I ran into was technically, according to my hypothesis, the actual differentiation between electromagnetism and gravity occurs in the like 10 to the minus 28th decimal places, and it's an addition subtraction equation, which means that the end result is that like it just doesn't work.
All right, so you as an engineer do know that you can easily do summation algorithms that are going to preserve your round off. So just the even k-hand summation is going to be sufficient.
To a greater or lesser degree. To a greater or lesser degree.
And you can use arbitrary arithmetic packages. So I can even point you to those. So multi-precision libraries by GNU, et cetera, or you can just use Mathematica, which does it automatically.
Now you can
also, if you're doing programming on your own,
MathCAD.
Okay, but if you're using MATLAB, then you can also have MATLAB do compiled C for you. And if you do that, then you can always use the long double form, which is the 80 bits instead of just 64. So you can get better precision. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that there's an option here where you can get better details.
I got to the point where it appears so it takes place at like 28 decimal places in. 28 to 30 decimal places in, and I got to the point where
it just sounds like round off to me. Like you were saying before. I'm just saying you could probably confirm that.
Well, that's what I'd like to do. So you'll have to send me that information because that was the limit that I hit. Was that if you start to talk about that, it's not round off. It really isn't. Like it actually works out where If you do, so when I start talking about like the 3 decimal places, that's outside of that. That was trying to come up with a testable hypothesis,
Right.
an experimental design, and
That's
where
what he's saying. Here's the thing, and then I want to I'm just trying to check if I have a sanity check.
Right. So I predict X, and okay, I get X in terms of large scale phenomenon, and that's fantastic. The problem is Y. How do I actually test this in a realistic scenario where I don't have an entire universe on hand that I can sum up, whenever I want?
Look,
so
all you have to do is find that cat from Men in Black, and then steal a few of those marbles, right?
That's or I just need to make a miniverse. If I get a miniverse,
a little
a miniverse battery,
be good for you.
A what?
Get a
DPM, just a shard.
I can run my car on it, and that's all that I need to do.
Get your ZPM from Stargate. Just go ahead and create a pocket of subspace and yank that shit out, right? Unless you're gonna fuck over a whole other universe, in which case you might not want to do that one. That was a great episode from Stargate Atlantis. I loved that one.
Which one was that?
That was one where the other Rodney comes over and everyone just like they all like him until the very end, and Rodney's like, "Well, you liked him better." He's like, "Nah, he was a prick."
I have to actually watch Stargate Universe again. I haven't seen that in forever.
Did I say Universe? I meant Atlantis. If I did.
Or sorry, Atlantis. The last one, the last Stargate series I watched.
Yeah. So SGU is okay. They could have very much made it less about the shitty relationship with the captain, or whatever the guy was.
Yes.
Like it was a great character and all, but like holy shit, we don't need to go back to Earth to see this drama.
Well, I think that's the problem is that like I think they turned around and looked at Battlestar Galactica and they said, "Oh, look, we're going to do that, but with the Stargate universe."
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to roll with this. And the only problem is it doesn't work. Stargate was never about that. It was all about the fact that you have this magical, mystical portal that takes you to a random planet with literally the worst things that you can possibly imagine trying to kill you. That was what made Stargate awesome.
But with Marines.
Humans are bored.
Kinda.
Yeah, it was.
It was very much
like, with Marines.
Well, it's like Sliders with Marines, but on different planets. You know?
Yeah, and a scientist. And a plucky kid sidekick, but whatever.
And I think like if you go into Stargate Universe, they actually cleared up. So you go through the first season. The first season is like pulling teeth. And you get through the second season, and the second season is fantastic because basically they stopped attempting to murder each other and decided to actually work together and make this one, which is the only logical thing, right? If I had an army of engineers and scientists, I'm not going to be like, all right, you know what the first thing we're going to do? Let's go overthrow the captain. We'll worry about food, water, and personnel safety later. Let's kill.
First thing we need to do is bitch. First thing you're going to do is bitch and moan and then piss off the guy in charge.
Right. So he's got guns. We want to take that from him and all of his soldiers. We're going to go after that first, and then we'll worry about food. Food is like not a problem.
Yeah, the first thing I'm doing there is finding out how much water I can put in my backpack. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. That was the biggest problem the first season.
We're talking about tanks. It's like, all right, you have a single point of failure here because once any contamination gets inside that big ass tank you got, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that was an episode, right?
Well, the thing is that you dive into the first few episodes, right, and it's all the stuff that so they need to go change out their air scrubbers, they need to go change out their water tanks, they need to go right, and that's all pretty good, but they're secretly trying to like do 3 coups and get everybody on board in the middle of trying to get water. As a general rule, that's not how humans operate. It just doesn't come off authentic.
Well, humans can be that stupid, but you got to remember that part is that's a trick you got to remember is a lot of people are that stupid. It's just that
I don't know if they're that stupid, though.
People that stupid probably wouldn't be in that situation, though, because they probably wouldn't have been picked.
Well, the other thing about people that stupid, you can often just yell at them really loud and point, and that kind of gets it done. Like, hey, stop that. Go and do this other thing. It's like, okay.
That's just making me think of Cartman with a stick.
There you go. Yes, exactly.
Bap! That's a bad kitty.
Oh man, that would be great. I would love that.
Respect my authority.
Now the second season was actually pretty good though, right? Like they sorted most of that shit out. And and then they just kind of left it hanging there. It's like, hey.
Yeah, I was just they said, hey, there's some structure to the universe, and they just killed the show.
Oh, I know. Of all of the, like, I don't think so. First off, like, SG1 needs to be enshrined. I think we can all agree that you take SG1 and that gets off the shelf. You don't ever make another SG1 again. You know,
No,
if
you
you
just
do,
run from there.
if you do,
Or
you
Atlantis.
just recast it with new special effects because the first season, looking back, it's terrible, right?
Fair,
that is
fair.
the only thing you do with SG1 is you basically take everything, you attempt to improve it, and somehow you drag, you know, Richard Dean Anderson out of retirement and make
God,
him
that poor
do
guy.
something.
He is limping along now. Like he still looks great and all. It's just like you can tell he wants nothing to do with the show now. He is so done.
Oh yeah. I
agree. Like what they should do is they already had the movie at the end of the whole Ori plot with Stargate Atlantis. What they should do now with SGU was what they obviously were going towards, which was that there was going to be some structure higher to go through a multiverse that was already suggested in Stargate Atlantis with the same episodes I was talking about.
Well,
like they had multiple episodes where they talk about a multiverse. What they really were leading into was putting a gate on it.
There's two major things that I think that they could tie in, and everybody would be happy. One is the Furlings, because those motherfuckers just up and vanished.
Right.
Like, I'm absolutely amazed.
They're like the gate builders, and then they're gone.
Yeah. Except like all you know about them is that they have transmat technology, and that's it. Like that's the only thing you know. You know that they can transport people between planets using rocks and a goddamn little mini handheld cell phone thing, right? That's their technology level, is that they have the ability to transport people between planets using your iPhone. That's pretty good. I think you could make the argument that they're the ones that just they just spawn galaxies because they have nothing better to do.
Hey, maybe they could tell us about dark matter.
Right? There you go. See, I still think that's electromagnetic. I think that is arising from the structure of matter.
God, you fucking Electric Universe people. I'm not apologizing about that guy I was roasting like last year either. That guy was a fucking nut.
I don't know who that was.
Well, it was when you first told me that you do the Electric Universe stuff. It was the guy who was sitting there just convinced he was going to convince me from brute force stupidity that Electric Universe is the right thing.
See, I'm not convinced of it because it's kind of crazy.
Well,
like I haven't.
Real briefly, why not
really
give us a TLDR on the Electric Universe?
Which the overall summation, there's like 7 or 8 different versions of it.
Okay, so pretend like say you're trying to explain string theory. Instead of diving into M theory, then give the basics.
Okay, so the short version is we have the simple model of the universe, right? And that's like we have a handful of charged particles and non-charged particles making up a nucleus. It's your neutron, your proton, your electron, right? And then you have your 4 fundamental forces. Your strong magnetic, your weak magnetic, or your strong nuclear, weak nuclear, gravitational, and electromagnetic. Now, it turns out that when we dive into the math, the strong, weak, and electromagnetic forces can all be linked fantastically, right? It requires dozens of pages and really smart people, but they can do it. They can prove that those are all tied into the electromagnetic force. So the only thing that you have is this one outlier, and it's gravity. Now, gravity is the first force that we ever discovered. And if you dive into this, right, the experiment was absolutely amazing where they proved it. It's not Newton having an apple fall on his lap. Like, he kind of hypothesized the whole thing, but where they actually proved it, they basically took 2 leaded weights, tied it up to a string, and measured the twist of the string. Yeah. And that is how they proved gravity. It's absolutely an amazing experiment. And everybody who, again, going back to like, why is it that scientists struggle immensely when you look at what our ancestors did with, rocks and sticks? It's on that level of just sheer awesomeness. The problem is that gravity falls apart as soon as you start looking outside of Earth, essentially. So if you start looking at gas-planet interactions, that doesn't quite work. If you look at our interactions with the sun, that doesn't quite work. Like we have the AU, which is defined as the distance between the Earth and the sun, is slowly expanding kind of on a yearly basis. And that shouldn't be happening because we should be relatively stable. You start talking about, we have satellites, probes, moons, stuff like that orbit our gas planets, and they tend to have slightly faster acceleration. And then when you go out even bigger scale, right, you start talking about galaxies, stars, planets, those kinds of things. The actual speed of rotation that is derived from our theory and understanding of gravity on Earth it basically falls apart. We see much faster rotation than we really should, so that would indicate that there's more math in the not more math in the universe. There's always more math in the universe. There's more mass in the universe than what we think, what we can visibly see. So you run into this problem where all of a sudden we have this wonderful theory. It works absolutely beautifully on Earth. And we thought it worked really well with our solar system. The only problem is that our solar system and the calculations we derive is based off the theory itself. So it's kind of circular logic reinforcing it for our solar system. But as we start looking outside of the scope in which we develop this theory, it falls apart, right? And that's just going bigger. If you go smaller, you run into the same thing. At a certain point, it just doesn't seem to have any sort of effect whatsoever on actual particles. Now, there's actual valid reasons to this, namely most of the stuff that we start talking about when we start talking about nucleuses and atoms. That it's like relativistic effects, and gravity is so weak that it would be nothing.
Yeah, we're talking about 30 orders of magnitude here where it's just not going to make a difference.
The difference between the electromagnetic force...
Soup. So, yeah.
Yeah. So the difference between the electromagnetic force acting on a hydrogen atom and the gravitational force is literally like, think 10 to the minus 28 newtons for 2 hydrogen atoms, and that would be the electromagnetic force that they're experiencing. The gravitational force is like 10 to the minus 60. So it's 20 some odd orders of magnitude off in terms of the two things. So they're so far disparate that basically what it's come down to is people say, well, gravity has to exist for two reasons. One is that it works really, really well where we see it, and we haven't found anything else to prove it. And that's a terrible hypothesis, but that's what they're going with. And number two, that there's no way the electromagnetic force and the gravitational force are related because they're incredibly weak. And so what you have is you have a handful of people, myself included, although I am nowhere near anything that I would call advanced or special in this, who have attempted to try to create what's known as the grand unified theory. And the grand unified theory, the only purpose is to unify the four fundamental forces: your strong nuclear, weak nuclear, electromagnetic, and gravitational forces on some sort of level and plane. And the best effort seems to be electromagnetic. The problem that you have is that a lot of people who study the electromagnetic universe theory are frankly crazy. I watch these people and they use nonsense. They use nonsense nouns and verbs. They make shit up all the time, and it requires like epicycles of information in order to try to make their stuff work. So there are other people and you do actually find this in some physicists who study this kind of thing, the sane, normal, rational people who basically say, hey, it does appear that gravity is not real, so to speak. Not in the sense that we can't detect it, not in the sense of any of that stuff, but it seems to be deriving from something else. And typically this is what's known as an emergent phenomenon. An emergent phenomenon is, put shortly, a mathematically complicated scenario in which something happens that is unexpected, right?
That's more or less what you could say, yeah.
Yeah, so that's really what an emergent phenomenon is. It's not something that like you would inherently predict. It's just like
a short example of that is each of the neurons in your brain does something on a schematic level here. So nothing complicated. Each neuron does something very, very simple. It takes some inputs and says yes or no for an output. And an emergent phenomenon is consciousness.
Yes. That's a beautiful example. I was going to try dating because that's almost as complex as consciousness.
Sure.
But at least for engineers, right? It's infinitely more complex. I would find it much more easier to understand the human brain than I would the average human female. That's just, my wife would certainly agree. So it all depends on where you come in, and the problem that you have is like anything else. When you start talking about this fringe thing that there's a lot of people working at, a lot of people are crazy, And so what you have is I think I don't really remember the exact conversation, but I think I know the guy that you were going
he was crazy.
Which one?
Brian. His name was Brian, and he was crazy.
He's just nuts. My belief, on the other hand, is just that it's an emergent phenomenon. Essentially, it's the electromagnetic force.
Well, I know you're not nuts.
What's that?
I know you're not nuts.
Well, that is a very, very
much
strong. You are making many presumptions here. First off, I am an engineer. Second off, I am a nuclear engineer, so I am all kinds of nuts.
Well, you have nuts. You aren't nuts.
That may be true too. So my approach and my belief is that the gravity is derived as an emergent phenomenon that arises from the structure of matter and the electromagnetic force, and it's derived from two essential principles. One is that if we start talking about the major stuff, right, as we get more complicated atoms, the gravitational force will essentially fall off. So when we start talking about trying to put the Cavendish experiment, which was the original experiment that essentially proved it using, the twist of sinew or something like that, ridiculous and stupid, right? The Cavendish experiment, that was done with leaded balls because they believed very firmly that it was solely tied to mass. And when you put mass, you want the biggest, heaviest object you can, right? And obviously you can't grab a couple planets and attach them to string and have it be in a nice little convenient universe. So they did leaded balls. The problem is that when we take the constants that we derive from that experiment and we start applying it everywhere, we are inherently assuming that it is directly caused by mass, not, kind of parallel to mass.
Well, we're also assuming that there are constants and not coefficients.
Yes, right, exactly. And I'm kind of more in the coefficient camp, if anything. And essentially...
So you believe things like the fine structure constant might have a gradient across the universe then? Potentially.
Not as much that, more like so if you actually take a look at your PZ values, so your ZA, I don't know, everybody calls it different. Your proton to neutron ratios in an atom for what's a stable atom, the majority of what we interact with is not the majority of universal matter. The majority of universal matter is overwhelmingly pure hydrogen.
Yeah, we're on a rock. That's the problem.
Right. We live on a rock. So we derived all this stuff from rock perspectives. We are rock people. We did it from rock perspectives. And then the entire rest of the universe is a single proton with an electron.
If you start singing "We Built This City," I'm going to start hitting something.
What's that? Oh. No, the one thing you don't have to worry about is me diving into pop culture references. That's never going to happen.
Oh, that's old, though. It's old enough to be funny.
So basically, my premise is that if we instead start from a construction of a hydrogen universe and a hydrogen atom is as simple as you get, what you can essentially do is you can take the differential with respect to time, and what that means is that we take the interval of time, not we perceive it in minutes, seconds, whatever, and we take it down to its infinitely smallest unit, right? At that point in time, if we were to freeze time and look at the universe in a frozen perspective of time, we could zoom in on an atom and we would find that each atom, each electron within those atoms is at a specific location. That's a fundamental principle of physics. We don't generally operate with that because by the time we start talking about human timescales, we're dealing with electron probability clouds because they're zooming around so fast and it's too difficult to see them. But if you took the differential with respect to time and you looked at it at that infinitesimally small gap and you froze time in its place, we could go in and take a look at the structure of matter and see where each electron is in relation to the nucleus, right? Because it's not going to be moving. If you talk about a hydrogen-dominated nucleus, that is a much less complicated scenario than a leaded nucleus, right? And the hydrogen nucleus has one electron and one proton, and they will be clearly visible. And you could actually start drawing out a diagram between them and start basically doing your summation of triangles, right? Your electron attraction, your electron from one nucleus is going to attract the proton of the other nucleus, and and vice versa. And the protons are going to repel each other, and the electrons are going to repel each other. And if you do a sum of the forces, right, the sum of the forces will not be zero, depending on its configuration and orientation of space. What's that?
So this comes down to London dispersion and van der Waals.
Right. But if at that moment in time, it will not be equal to zero at any given time.
You can calculate the attraction between them.
Right. If we expand that point of time, it will be zero, technically speaking, right?
Well,
but for an instantaneous moment in time, it will not be zero.
So when you if you time average it, the value is still non-zero.
Right.
Just in general. So you can average it over an infinite time, and it will still be a non-zero attraction. That's the basis of the van der Waals attraction phenomenon.
Well, sort of. But van der Waals requires a certain distance, and
well, yeah. So here's the thing: the value will be non-zero at any distance, as long as the two atoms aren't inside of each other. But it should fall off rapidly with distance.
Right. So yes, it does. So the van der Waals, you start talking about spatial coordinates kind of thing. Like think of a hydrogen cloud in space. Van der Waals forces are not really taking place in there. But the premise and the approach is essentially that if you were to freeze time and look at it, you would be able to draw these things between all these different atoms and have a relative force of attraction and force of repulsion. And between all of the atoms, the average would be zero attraction and zero repulsion. But on average, right, at any instantaneous time, there would be some attraction or some repulsive mechanism in effect. Then, if you start increasing that time you start integrating the distances and the effects of what happens over a period of time, the end result is a diversion in the equation of, basically ballistic trajectories. So, for instance, if I was to take an atom and I was to freeze it in time, or take two atoms of hydrogen, and I was to freeze them in time and freeze them in a specific orientation, right? And let's say the electrons top in one, both electrons are top and both protons are bottom in one model, versus electron on top and a proton on the bottom for one, and a proton vice versa on the other. So one is in the maximal attractive state and one is the maximal repulsive state. The end result is if we expand time over that period of time, we will get a differential between the actual ballistic trajectory of such atoms. And we start talking about, thousands and millions and trillions and, however many you want to go for atoms, you'll start seeing that effect. And the end result is that you will see a greater impact of attractive forces than you will of repulsive forces, because everything falls off as a function of r squared. And that is my hypothesis in a nutshell. Now, you dive into that, and it gets really crazy in the math. It turns into energy. It turns into energy at some point, and you just your eyes go crossed, and you're like that the world doesn't exist anymore, and you have to come out of dark spaces, very dark places. when you're trying to,
it kind of doesn't, right? I mean, it's all just energy vibrating at a high rate, right?
I think when you start talking about what Craig was talking about, where the scientists set up their limits, I'm kind of at that point where I chased that rabbit hole, and I didn't like what I saw. You look into the void, and the void stares back at you, and you realize that
the trick is to be the thing staring back from the void. That way, you can piss off everyone.
Oh yeah, well that's a great idea. You go right ahead and do that.
That's what I do.
Dive right in, as they say.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with not doing.
What you do is you go in there, you find the monster, and you fuck its mother, and then make sure you bring it flowers and stuff. You gotta do it right.
But that's the short of my version of the electromagnetic universe theory. There are dozens of others. I think there's one guy I still follow on Twitter who periodically he's been attempting to get his experiment to work forever and a day, and I don't think it has yet. But
well, I think here's the thing: it's laudable to be exploring these things, and there needs to be a lot of people out there, especially and I would call myself as too if I was to look into these kind of things. Someone looking at it at the amateur level for the math. Let alone see if there's any kind of potential for falsifiable experimental observations. That needs to exist. It's not the province. It's not the province of some ivory tower. It's the same thing with even just basic astronomical observations. That kind of stuff is done at an amateur level globally all the time.
Yep.
So there's nothing wrong with talking about these things. Like we were talking about, I guess, before we went on air here. Like it's not wrong to be wrong. It's actually fantastic to be wrong. It's wrong to be wrong. Find out you're wrong, and then continue to be convinced you're right.
That's a crime against the knowledge, if you will.
It's very difficult too, though, right? Like you get to a certain point where you start talking about some of these things on an amateur level, and you've developed it, kind of in isolation, and you've tried to share it with your peers as best you can. And it turns out that once most people leave college, they stop caring, like immediately. Yeah. Right. Once they have a paycheck and they've got some food and they've got a spouse, that's it. They're done, right? The rest of it is not of interest to them, and that's the problem that you have, is that you start talking about a lot of the stuff that develops in the amateur sector, and you get people who get too emotionally invested in their hypothesis because they have no one there who is able to either A, understand what they're talking about, and B, refute them. And that's kind of where I'm at now. So that's one of the reasons why I've kind of stopped working on my stuff, is if I can't find somebody who can sit there and tell me I'm wrong, then I should just assume that I'm wrong to start. And that's kind of a terrible way to go about it, but it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, it's better than being up your own ass.
Right. So my assumption is that I'm doing something horribly, horribly wrong, and I'm explaining it in a terrible manner, and nobody understands it. And that's so, maybe when somebody pays me, I'll do it. So
it's like dealing with a non-engineer.
Yeah. Huh.
What are your requirements, customer?
Let me tell you. What's that?
That's a good engineer.
Which one?
The one
what are your requirements?
Well, that's the thing.
That's a bad engineer.
You're not told what the requirements are. You're told what the customer wants.
Yeah.
So that's going to lead to a good time. And
which is not if the engineer goes in and tells the asks the customer for specific requirements, they're not doing their job properly, because 9 times out of 10 what they want is impossible,
or it's just not going to happen.
Or it's not.
That's what marketing departments are for, to make you something completely impossible.
The marketing department is there to promise the things you can't deliver, so that when you don't deliver them, you look like shit.
I love. Did you ever see the skit where they did the 3 red lines, whatever it is? Did you ever see that skit?
I don't think I know which one you're talking about.
I'll have to link it.
Right.
It's supposed they didn't tie it into engineering specifically, but it felt like being in every engineering conversation I've ever had. Let's see. Let me pull it up. It's like 3 red lines, or 7 red lines, also known as the expert. There we go, the expert skit. And it's this guy who's been asked to draw 7 red lines, 3 of which are perpendicular, 2 of which are parallel, and they're all supposed to be something or other, and some of them are supposed to be blue, right? So you got like 7 red lines, and a couple of them are supposed to be blue, and it's this absolutely impossible thing, and you're just looking at them like, no, that's not possible. I like that one. I'll post it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll make sure and link that for people who want to check it out.
It's really funny. It
sounds good.
It's like Dilbert given form.
Yeah, what I'm seeing here as a quick description is clients make an unreasonable request.
So there
you go.
Okay. So another thing you can look up with these kind of things is there's some great XKCDs on just the requirements of a customer for a person who designs a web page. Like if you ever have a customer trying to get you to do things for web design, it's the same kind of pulling teeth kind of bullshit. Oh god,
I could only imagine. I've read some horror.
I mean, even like with what I do from a nuclear perspective. I've had some folks who have had to have an uncomfortable conversation.
Well, things like exactly what are radiation limits.
Yeah, things like, well, more like no, more like you can't do that. Why can't they do that? You will blow all of your limits. Which limits will I blow? All of them.
All of them. No, it's funny.
The question isn't which limits you will blow. The question is which limits will you not blow? And the answer is there's none left. You've already crossed that line.
Like we one of the things we did in my group previously is nanotube work, and it's funny because the parallels with this COVID situation are very very similar, and the difference being really between them is that so nanotubes are an accumulative disruption inside your cellular system. It's that's the problem, is they cause inflammation.
Oh, that's the nanomaterials stuff.
Yeah,
I haven't dealt with too much IH on that.
So we
I've
do.
heard
We
it's
use
terrible.
it's really hard to contain that stuff. So you have to HEPA filter everything, HEPA vacuum everything, wipe everything down. Everything goes in a bag. You wear bunny suits, the whole bit. Imagine it's like working. It's probably like working at like an Intel site, but like in the middle of a dust storm.
So what, like asbestos, but
worse.
Yeah, like
asbestos isn't that bad.
It only causes lung cancer.
So
it's
the
nanoscopic.
issue with asbestos,
yeah, nanoscale asbestos.
Yeah, the issue with this stuff is that they've started finding that it actually has like cancerous effects, and it is a lot like asbestos. So asbestos is very very unique because asbestos is actually not that bad of stuff as long as you don't start chewing it up and mixing it up in the air. So basically, the problem that we have with asbestos specifically is not the asbestos itself, but our immune system's reaction to it.
Oh, it's also it's that and the aerosolization that occurs when you disrupt the stuff, because it's brittle and fragile.
So you get this stuff that gets mixed in the air and it touches your lung, and your immune system says, "Aha, an invader! I shall assault that." The problem is that asbestos doesn't break down. The reason we used it is because it doesn't break down.
Yeah,
so your body sits there.
In that sense.
So your body throws everything at it, and it's this thing that doesn't break down. Your body says, "Aha! Well, in that case, we will attack everything around it."
So the thing about that is, this actually ties in. It's pretty cool. When I was in undergrad, well, it's funny because the guy who taught my bio for engineers course was from my department, and he came in and he basically told the class at the very beginning he didn't want to teach the class, which I thought was perfect, because it's like, well, that's an admission everybody needs to hear, and we can all go home now. But no, but it was cool because I guess it was either in his group or a related person's group. They actually had basically we knew the mechanism by which smoke causes cancer, and it's very intimately related to what the same thing is going on with asbestos. And largely that once the square cells up top, they form, you have these squamous cells, so it's the flat square cells. There's only so many layers deep that goes, and they will not react to the growth factor that's released in a positive feedback cycle way. They have a negative feedback termination on that cycle, so that when they finish granulating into a defect, they stop growing. The columnar, the cells underneath, the small cells, so small cell lung cancer be the thing everybody is familiar with as lung cancer, they don't have that regulatory stop. So when they get that positive feedback loop where they respond to growth factor by dividing and producing more growth factor, they don't have a terminus when they butt up against each other that says shut off production of growth factor. So that's why small cell lung cancer proliferates. And so you only have so many layers deep of the flat cells, and then you get to those small cells. So the same kind of thing happens. That's why the inflammation drives the formation of cancer. And it happens. So when people say, well, which smoke is going to affect me, whenever I end up talking to pothead friends, because they exist, and more power to them, do what you're going to do. I do alcohol because I know I'm going to be able to replace part of my liver if I need to. You can't exactly replace your lungs that easily. They don't grow back. So I'm not judging them for fucking up their body in the way they choose, because we all do that, and I'm going to be a hypocrite on that one. But when I talk to them, I say just eat it, because breathing it in is going to cause cancer. We know this for a fact. There is no if, and, or but about it now. Breathing in shit that causes irritation to your lungs in any way, and that is all smoke. Any particulate like dust, all smoke, all that kind of stuff is going to do this eventually. Just breathing that in habitually on purpose is going to give you cancer. There's not a question about it anymore.
Well, so there's other ways to do it though, right? Like, I'm not saying that I'm a pothead. Obviously, I pee clean every single time. But There is one of the interesting things about that drug is that it actually the psychoactive compound aerosolizes before you hit your smoke limit. So if you're going for like what is it, vaporizers? Is that what they call them?
There's sublimators. There's vapor. Also, vaporizers is pens, the dipshit pens. So that the problem there is you're putting polyethylene glycol into your lungs, and that is going to cause problems.
There was there was like this thing, right?
Sublimate is one of the things they do.
Maybe that's that's probably more accurate. I think they called it a vaporizer or something like that. But yeah, sublimation would be more accurate, where basically they just turn the solid into gas, and then they'd leave the leaf particulates untouched.
Yeah, basically just like heat the shit out of the leaf on a piece of aluminum.
That's what they used to call vaporizers, but before
that's what I thought. That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
You both were all exactly on the same page here. So the vaporizers they talk about now are vape pens. Those are what I call it dumbass.
Not really the same thing.
And what Craig is saying is technically correct.
So they're designed to be
the technical thing is a sublimation. It's the same thing as like coming out to snow on a warm day.
Sublimation had a bad. So typically, why it's called a vaporizer is people, one, they didn't know the difference between the two phenomenon, so whatever. But two, also sublimation is kind of got a bad name because it's associated with other drugs that are much worse for you that are also sublimated. Yeah, so you can do things that are be extremely stupid, like say sublimate cocaine.
Got it.
Shit like that. Yeah. So caffeine sublimates. If you didn't know.
Well, this
not that anybody is sublimating caffeine.
Tell me more. At which the temperature at which caffeine sublimates.
Yeah. Would you like to know more? Because I don't fucking like caffeine.
if that popped up as an ad on my Google ad search, I'd be very happy.
So the whole basis of a vape pen is to try to achieve the same thing that vaporizing used to mean sublimating the active psychoactives.
Got it.
So what they have is they'll have a hot coil inside there, and they use a carrier solvent to achieve this. That's the whole point of it. The problem is
but the ethylene glycol is terrible.
Well, if they're using propylene glycol, not ethylene.
Oh, propylene.
So propylene glycol is perfectly food safe. No, there's perfectly food safe. Perfectly food safe. PEG is perfectly food safe. The problem is, and I'm talking about propylene, not poly here.
Okay.
The problem is that it's not supposed to go in your fucking lungs. That is not something that it is safe for. It's like breathing in water that's thick. It's not good for you.
Yeah.
So you're going to cause generalized inflammation, and they're finding this with a lot of dumbass kids these days. Now, obviously, there's degrees to this. There's shades of gray. If you're a heavy user, you're probably going to feel like shit a lot faster. So you take that with a grain of salt for what it is. You can probably vape to your heart's content and not be a heavy user and probably be fine for decades. It's not going to just cause cancer. The problem is that it's going to cause other problems. So it's not causing cancer. It really shouldn't be your selling line if it causes other problems.
Fair point.
I mean, that's kind of a generic statement for 90% of the health crises that we have, like or replacement 99% technologies.
Of food falls into that. That's the thing, though. Like, belladonna doesn't cause cancer, but it sure as shit sucks to eat it.
True. I mean, true. But to be fair, right? That is legitimately the tagline that is used in almost all technology nowadays, right? Yeah. Environmental technology is the same way. You start talking about like nuclear plants. So nuclear plants are pretty safe and they're pretty robust. You start talking wind and solar, and they're like, well, yeah, we don't have fuel costs. You're like, yeah, but it costs you 10 times as much to build it. Like,
I was gonna say, what you're doing is bypassing all the fuel that was. There's all. How the fuck did they get the thing to the site?
Well, I'm less when we start talking about like wind and solar and all those. I'm actually less concerned about their transportation costs because that's not super huge.
Well, environmental costs.
Huge, but the environmental cost is massive.
Well, right? there are bird species that are almost extinct now because of wind farms.
Oh yeah. Well,
now localized extinction here.
Your solar panels last for 15 to 20 years, right? And then it's a RCRA hazardous waste. It is nothing but lead, cadmium, and chromium. There's nothing there.
Here's the other thing. Here's one that pisses me off. And now electric vehicles are a laudable goal. Thank you to all the early investors who are going into them now. but you're all fucking retarded because
Yes.
batteries are an environmental disaster when you're making lithium-ion batteries.
Well,
There's
and
no way.
they're never going to improve. You can
Well, no,
only
they
fit
can't.
so many electrons within a certain amount of space.
Here's the thing. The batteries themselves are not really the problem right now. It's the manufacture and the complete lack of recycling.
Yes,
Because
well,
the
that's
recycling process is so goddamn energy intensive. It is almost as bad, if not worse, than the virgin mining process, virgin materials mining process. So, let's go ahead and put this into context for the difference between an IC and an EV for these vehicles. So, combustion engine vehicles, about half of the carbon footprint of them for a 10-year service life has already happened by the time you purchase the vehicle. For an electric vehicle, that cost at purchase time in terms of carbon footprint is another 50%. So they've already done 75% of an IC's service life of carbon footprint by the time they exist. That's just from the fact that they the battery involved and the different way the frame's done and the engine and so on. When you talk about a 10-year service life, they get all of their energy right now from non-renewable sources. So most of the energy for these things comes from an inefficient electric grid that is using combustion power on the other side of it to generate the electricity. So they are wasting power in a horrible way. But as soon as we get renewables, that becomes the power generation is not a problem. And as soon as we recycle the fucking batteries, the environmental hazard part.
But renewables are a terrible technology. Renewables are a terrible technology.
Generally speaking, yes.
So we should not say that when they get renewables, right?
Solar is the one that is going to work, and it has to work in conjunction with nuclear. There's no question.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem, right? Here's the problem, right? So I build a solar plant, and I build a nuclear plant as backup. Why would I build the solar plant?
No. So here's the thing: we need nuclear as a stopgap to get the fusion in general. We need more. So nuclear should be. So the way it works, the way it ideally would work, is that we stretch our supply of nuclear materials by using the solar power to top up battery backup.
Well, we don't have a shortage of nuclear materials.
Right,
we have like 10,000 years of fissionable materials available to us right now today.
We don't have 10,000 years of space for the waste from that material.
But the waste is like nothing. The waste is a fraction of the size of the waste of solar.
And we can recycle the nuclear waste and so on. I get it. Believe me, I'm on board with the whole just going with nuclear thing. I'm just saying that for sake of argument. Ideally,
okay. I don't make that concession because it doesn't make any sense.
Ideally, what you would do is you know that there's the idea of base load and then surge load for the grid, right?
Yep.
Okay, so ideally you would make sure that you'd have guaranteed base load with nuclear power, and then you would have battery backup that is effectively just charged over time, either by nuclear or solar as needed, depending on where you are. And then the battery backup on top of that is what takes up all surge load.
See, I disagree with that. I think the appropriate structure is nuclear, hydro, and hydrogen as a fuel base, right? And if you did hydro can handle the surge as well as batteries without the complication of the energy intensity associated with manufacturing it. And on top of that, you don't have the waste issues associated with solar panels or the longevity issues. Because, when we start talking about solar panels, they're like, oh, yeah, look, solar's really cheap. But that only applies if you sit there and hold a 20-year cost control. If you sit there and you look at a lifespan of a nuclear plant versus a solar plant, you've had to replace that solar plant 8 times over the course of a nuclear reactor's lifespan.
Right. So for solar, really the reason why we should using it is because it has so many more applications outside of the domain of nuclear, and that's really that's the rub. So fissionable materials, we have them. We have to actually manufacture them at the right quality in order to be useful. Solar is pretty straightforward.
No. That's only if you're going for a uranium-235 based reactor.
Not even that though. Well, see, so you don't even have to do that, and the plutonium reactors, blah blah blah. And I understand there's artificial restrictions on supplies for some of these things. Believe me.
You can run thorium in most modern nuke plants, and
I would
still
rather
manage.
do that. I think
What's
thorium. I would rather do that. I'm a full-on lift to a reactor believer.
I actually am not, but that's
Well, there's problems with fluoride, yes, but I still think
no. Outside of that, from a Radcon perspective, I don't know how they would get a molten salt reactor up and running.
Really?
So I was on board with that for a really long time, and then I actually started looking at like rad dose rates and how we handle it. Imagine what happens when a pipe breaks, right? You are going to be spilling liquid fuel all over whatever you're going to do, and I have no idea how you would come back from that. Right, ignoring the chemical composition, the temperature issues, any of that stuff. I have literally no idea how you would handle the radiation.
Well, Chernobyl still has the elephant foot, so I the concern's right there. I get it.
Yeah, that is very real, but you know,
I mean, well, it's
you
still
kind of build with that in mind. You know, that's
what's the elephant right now? It's like 400 C still, something hotter than that. It's still glowing hot. It's that hot right now.
That's because nuclear is amazing and still produces energy even when the whole system fails.
Trust a nuclear engineer to come in and say that's our staying power.
Listen, we work when everything doesn't. It's still 400 degrees and the sun isn't shining.
Everything looks bright when everything's bright.
Yeah, future's so bright. We're gonna need shades.
I'm okay with that. You're, but I mean, like, so I guess for me, like, when we start talking about solar, I just don't see a cohesive argument.
Well, so like, here's the thing. Here's the argument. If you're in space,
right? So what's wrong with nuclear in space?
Heat.
So what's wrong with nuclear in space?
Getting rid of heat.
That's actually not that hard, though, right?
You have to radiate it away, and solar allows you to do that more efficiently. Now, I'm not saying that when you get out of...
If you want to argue solar in space, right, you're basically making the argument that the only thing you can go is Earth and closer, because the solar energy falls off as a factor of the R squared.
Right.
Whereas I could deal with the nuclear reactor heat energy in space, which, by the way, I could just vent directly, right? Like I could dump it into particles and put it out the back as thrust.
Right.
That's
but
something.
Here's the thing: what is the point of moving forward full scale with solar in space? It's the sun. What do we want to put around the sun, say, in the next 1,000 years?
I have no idea where you're going with this.
A Dyson sphere.
Yeah, you pull that off, buddy.
Okay.
we're gonna have to start getting into the point where we're exploding planets and harvesting them for resources to pull that shit.
No, that's what I'm saying. Give me Mercury right now. That's all I need. That's all I would need is the planet Mercury. There's a nice spot on the backside because it's tidally locked. There's a crater there that's relatively speaking cold. And that's the launch plate. So the whole point of advancing solar is the fact that it eventually is going to be a massive boon to us to just harvest solar. Because once you get to that point where you start, and you can see it with the way that the industrialization is rapidly still growing in other countries that are coming up out of basically throwing rocks. You know, the entire Indian subcontinent is now starting to come online. China is still burning more and more.
But I still like that's not a cohesive argument. Arguing that we should implement solar technology now, that we should pay the subsidies that we do for solar, that we should have to try to do the load balancing that we should have to do for solar, that we should have to sit there and deal with this now so that we can build a Dyson sphere somehow, 10,000 years from now. That's a fucking stupid argument.
I'm just saying that's
also a little bit unreasonable. 10,000.
I gave
for a Dyson sphere.
Yes.
That is absolutely reasonable for a Dyson sphere.
Well, it has exponential growth. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it does not have exponential growth.
Well, you're going
to be limited. You're going to be limited to the sheer volume of people available to build the resources that are required.
You wouldn't use
and how fast you can strip a planet, right? And we only have so many planets that we can strip. So I'm sorry. I'm going with 10,000 years on building a Dyson sphere.
Anyway, the point
I
here
think
being
you're unreasonably
there are other...
but nonetheless.
Sure. All right. I'll take 1,000 years. We start. Today. You start Craig's Dyson Sphere company. I'm okay with that. I will not invest in you until you actually get something up there and make it happen.
Well,
and in the meantime,
we've got the other conversation about ending the disease of age. So this might just be a moot point.
I mean, I will pay the $130 to set up the company in Delaware, and I will call your bluff on the shit.
Okay.
By the way, it is that cheap to set up
in 1,000 years, we'll find out how much more energy you produced from your Dyson.
I'll come back and piss on your grave.
We'll do the real fake podcast or whatever it is, and we'll do it 1,000 years from now, and we'll be like, here's the reunion. Here's the
episode 400,000.
Maybe just to be safe, we'll do it in 30-30 just so that we can match it up with the 2020.
Hey, no.
No. Let's go. Yeah, that the 30-30. There you go.
How about this? So I actually have a game that got greenlit on Steam, and I set my publication date as in the year 9000. So or 9001. So we can go ahead and reconvene when I launch that game.
There you go.
Before that year.
All right, cool. One down.
There you go. I'm sorry. I see that as this is one of the problems that I have with a lot of the climate change stuff. Is you have these time horizons that are so ridiculously far into the future for like, hey, if we do this today, and you're like, okay, when's that going to come to pass? Oh, it's going to be 400 years from now. No, motherfucker. You build today. What we need today. I need to eat today, I need to go to work today, and I need to sit there and have the economy run today. I don't give a fuck about 400 years from now. That's for, like, my grandchildren.
Well, here's the other thing is in 100 years, people are going to wonder what the fuck we were doing today. Because universally, the planet is getting, A, richer, and B, healthier.
Oh,
and,
yeah, absolutely.
They're gonna we will have the resources to mitigate phenomenon if they even happen.
Well,
not saying anybody's wrong or right here. I'm just saying, all right, let's just presume that the doomsday scenario happens in 100 years. In 100 years, we're gonna have the resources to take care of the problem. That kind of
thing is
either the city moves or it doesn't move. It can stay in the way of the water, whatever.
When you start talking about climate change literature, though, it's the only literature in the world that does not ever talk about numbers.
Oh,
right?
Well, no. When you get into the numbers, that's when things kind of start falling apart.
They just don't. We don't talk about the economics, because if you actually decide that you want to talk about economics and climate change, well, that's perfectly fine. Then we shouldn't take any action whatsoever because it's not cost effective.
What was his name?
It's
Bjorn
effective
Lomborg
for
did it.
the ones that are trying to be climate hustlers.
Here's the reason why. So this is the reason why when I go and I look at these reports, I only go and look at the Working Group 1 reports because they're the ones who do the physical basis.
Yes.
Now, say what you will about their conclusions because they're all wrong.
Yeah.
But the data they produce, the data they produce, the competent science part of it is the part I read.
Yeah.
And read and enjoy reading. I should say that I read the whole thing. But that's the part that I actually do read and pay really close attention to. Because you're not talking to so they go through this whole thing where they say, here's our models, here's all the problems with the models, here's all the good things from the models, here's where they are definitely going to work, and here's where they probably aren't going to work. And then at the end they just stop and say, well, the world's fucked because we've screwed it up as humans. And I have to look at this and say, but that's not what your graph says right above the paragraph.
Oh, that reminds me of the CDC gun data when they did their study on gun violence and never talk about it anymore.
Oh, you mean the one where they left out the 500,000 events every year where someone with a gun stops a problem?
No, you mean the minimum 500,000 up to as many as 6 million.
Conservative number.
So what is it? Hold on here. I have something for this. I have something for this because I've read those reports. And so there's like when you start talking about the reports, so the thing for me is what I want to know how much of an impact we're going to have by modulating our CO2, right? That is as an engineer,
these percentages of a degree. Bullshit.
No. I want to know exactly what we're going to have as an impact, right? And so what you see is you go in, and these are actually taken from one of the assessment reports. I have this. I actually pulled up the PowerPoint. I'm so proud of myself. I get like nerd rage every once in a while, and I go create a PowerPoint, and then I bury it somewhere because I realize that nobody's going to watch it or cares.
Right.
So, but it's really useful for conversations like this. So you go through, and they say the equilibrium climate sensitivity quantifies the response of the climate system to constant radiative forcing on multi-century timescales. Basically, it figures out how much our temperature is going to go up as a result of how much CO2.
So they did a sensitivity study.
Yes, this is from the IPCC, right? And they say the sensitivity is likely in the range of 1.5 degrees C to 4.5 degrees C. Who the fuck turns around and gives me a plus or minus 50% range on what's going to happen? And says, yep, we're scientifically confident on that. Like I am an American sniper. I shot somewhere between 1 and 3 miles away. Well, that sounds very impressive. But there's a rather big difference between pulling off a shot at a mile and pulling off a shot at 3 miles. There's just a small margin of error there, right? Like I can run a mile in plus or minus, what is it? I can run 10 miles an hour plus or minus 5 miles an hour. Well, if I can run 15 miles an hour, that's quite impressive. If I can run 5, I can pass you while walking.
This is exactly the kind of shit I'm talking about. And the thing that pisses me off with these is, at least the science, when they put these in the reports, they actually say this right up in front. They say it directly, and it's very clear. What they then follow with, though, in the policy reports, is how everything is going to be the 4.5 degrees.
Yes.
Just fuck off with that noise. You don't know.
Yes.
And the problem is, when you time to come back and reassess it, you realize that you were fucking wrong the last time.
Yes. Every single time. And it continues with all of this other stuff. And I think my favorite quote is that it says, no best estimate can be given because of a lack of agreement of values across assessed lines of evidence and studies. And you're like, okay, so we're in a situation where we have this huge range that, could be no big deal, could be very big deal. And they only talk about very big deal, but then they start talking about how the fact that they can't even provide best estimates because there's a disagreement depending on how you derive your evidence.
There's a very clear reason why, and it's also the only reason why there's one model that works out of the 31 that are curated by the UN. And which model is that? The Russian model. Why is their model different? Because when they talk about radiative forcings, they only use positive coefficients in the other 30 models. In the 31st model, the Russian model, that's what a country curates each model, by the way. In the Russia's model, they allow for a negative forcing term. That's the only reason, and it predicts way better, way better. Now, it doesn't predict perfectly, but it is just I think objectively better, and it's because they're not saying that the fucking sun is blasting us into oblivion because all sun energy stays on Earth. The Earth has an albedo, like we radiate heat.
Yes, and equilibrium is achieved relatively
by
quickly.
The way, if you could toss a link for the Russian model, so I can have that for everybody. That would be helpful.
I could actually. I think it's.
You might even have it just on hand.
I don't have it on hand, but I think I remember which graph.
Well, I remember there's a GitHub you can go to, and you can actually run these models yourself. They're all publicly available via the UN. Let's see. IPCC models.
It may be.
Oh, that's probably not going to help me, is it?
Yeah, that's going to be a bad search.
Corey.
Yeah, it's going to be a bad search. You're going to have a bad day. I think the other thing is that when you start talking about having 30 plus models, right, and they have 4 plus scenarios, you have 120 plus predictions.
Sure.
Right.
You have an ensemble.
If you can't turn around, you can call it a fucking prom queen. I don't give a shit. At the end of the day, if you have 120 different predictions, then whatever ends up happening, you got a prediction for it, right? Like it's the throw the spaghetti at the wall trick.
This is why an ensemble model is called an ensemble model, because you're supposed to have one average prediction at the end.
But they don't use the average prediction. They use the whole thing, and then they go, oh well, it didn't really work this year. It didn't quite work a lot according to the ensemble model, but it really did tie into this model. And the next year, it's this model's holding more accurate.
God, what were the models called? There was some acronym for the damn models, and I can't remember the freaking name.
The CMP5.
Yes, no, you're right. You're really. It's either that or really close.
CMIP5 or climate model
on CMIPs, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's CMIP. Yeah, there we go. CMIP 5. Blah blah blah. So the main thing with these kind of models, these climate models, is that they're curated by different countries, and the parameter set they use for their
CMIP5. That's what it is.
So CMIP 6 is out now. It looks like.
They haven't finished it.
They might
I think
not
they
have
got their
brought it
initial results.
It's going to be in the 6th assessment in 2021. I think.
Yeah. No.
Wait. Yeah. Okay. So 2013 had CMIP 5 and AR 5.
Yep. CMIP.
So 2021 is going to be CMIP 6.
Climate Model Intercomparison Project. That's what it stands for.
That's the one. Yeah. So
Yes.
the each country will have its own. Each of the countries participating has its own curated, basically its own set of parameters they use. You know, how many of these parameters are going to be included in the model because it's a parametric model. And you know, like I said, the countries that have been having poor performance, you know, so namely 30 of them, they only use positive coefficients. So you can think of when you design an equation and you want to regress something, if you want to keep a parameter positive, the easiest way to do that is to just square it. So that's one of the kind of things you can do, and it does speed up convergence quite significantly to do things like that. So I can understand easily why they did this, and especially given the hypothesis at the time when they were initially doing this with CMIP, like 3 or whatever. They said, well, clearly radiative forcing is causing the warming, and that should just okay, hey, there's the sun. But they also came up with the idea that the radiative forcing should be purely through absorption. There should be no albedo contribution. And that's largely what I think has driven the inaccuracy of these models, especially given the fact that they're covering events where a negative absorption is going to occur when you have reflection from, say, a volcanic eruption, things like that. If you fit these forced positive coefficients to these regions in time where
there's two
they're
problems.
not going to work right.
There's two problems, though, right? Like, so one of them is that you have no negative feedbacks, that you're not dealing with albedo, that you're not dealing with the actual change in energy radiation into space. That's absolutely true, right? But then you get, like, Zeke Housefather. And Zeke Housefather just put out a study, I think it was, like, last year or the year before, and he said, the models are doing really good, right? And everybody in the climate community touted this and said, Zeke Housefather has proven that the skeptics were wrong, that our models were fantastic, that they were right. Well, what Zeke said, if you go through it, is that the models are correct as long as we put in what actually happened. And you pause for a moment, and you say, okay, wait, what is so let's paraphrase Zeke's statement. Zeke's statement is really that climate models are fantastic, our assumptions were wrong. And that's if your base assumptions, right?
That's
exactly.
Very, 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 very bad problem.
Yeah, that's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. So
that is the reason why we had a Mars lander plow into the planet instead of land.
Well, the reason we had the Mars the Venus rover was a unit conversion issue.
No, it was the Mars. It was the Mars one too. So that was we built the thing in feet. We programmed it in meters.
Yeah.
And and just the landing part, which is what bothered me, is okay. So you programmed the rest of it in feet. What the hell happened? who was the fucking European in the room?
Yeah, it's that was the weirdest thing. Is they came out with that, and they're touting him as that, and I read his paper, and I'm like, wait a minute. So what he said was the models are great, but our assumptions were wrong. Well, if you have this built-in assumptions that are part of your problem, then the people who are pointing out that the models are putting shitty results out are kind of correct, aren't they? Like, Isn't that technically true that you were wrong? Like, but no.
Yeah, no. PCMDI has the CMIP. That was the thing. Okay. So they also have so many fucking acronyms. All right, so here is the let's see. So this is main CMIP 6 page, and then here's the CMIP 6 homepage for the actual program for climate model diagnosis and comparison. So PCMDI.
Oh, okay.
We'll toss. I'm going to toss this in. This may be a little bit older.
So hold on a second. We just PCMDI.
So that is what the actual they're trying to evaluate, and that is
that lower one way down there.
Yeah, that's the Russian model.
Yeah, that was what I was saying. It doesn't do great, but it does way better.
Yes, certainly better than the average.
Yeah, Yeah, you see that huge gap there? That's called fucking up royally.
Well, I think the thing is that
I'm seeing a big gap here in some of these.
There is. Well, you can actually dig in, and let me dig into some of my more projects because, like I said, I went crazy on PowerPoints at one time.
I mean, even at
Now,
the
now
beginning, there's a lot of difference.
So here's the problem with this plot right now, and it's because it has so much data on this, and I run into this myself a lot because of the shit I do. There's just so much data to push onto one image, you can't really do it easily.
Yeah.
The confidence intervals are not present.
That I agree. I agree.
So
The
they might
problem is
even agree
problem
with
is that the confidence intervals expand over the entire thing. So you have these huge intervals, and people are like, "Oh my god, they've been right," and you're like, "No. First off, that's at the lower confidence, the lower 95% CI boundary for this entire thing, and is cruising along at the lower 95% CI boundary. It's okay to have a confidence interval boundary, but it should be bouncing somewhere in between that. If it's only at the lowest portion of your boundary, then your mean is still off, right?
That's kind of the whole point here. So when especially with that in context, keep that in mind. Look at the y-axis. You can see when we were talking earlier about the difference between half a degree and like 2 degrees over the next 50 years, or say between 2 degrees and 4.5 degrees. Now look at the scale here. It's between minus 0.4 and 1.6.
Yes.
So when he says that they cover the whole thing, is literally correct here. Like there's no hyperbole.
Yep.
The entire thing is within the uncertainty bounds. So this is one of the reasons why, for instance, and this, by the way, is temperature, which happens all the time, every day. This is one of the reasons why when I see people talk about hurricanes and shit on Twitter, which are an infrequent phenomenon, and so infrequent and extreme phenomena, in order to tell today if humans had an impact on things, not just if things were changing, but if humans had an impact, conservatively, we would have to have another 100 years of data.
Well, the same thing's true for our temperature data. Right?
Well, temperature is much easier because it happens all the time, even if you do it averaging.
Partially, right? So a climate is defined as a 30-year window of time. So if we're operating within a 30-year window of time, then that means that if we go back for our data records and we only go back 150 years, of which, like 90 of it is complete shit, right? That means that we only have 5 data samples.
Well, so this is what I was saying.
Which we're trying to draw an inference from.
That is a very limited way of looking at it. So if you look at it as a deconvolution problem, you have every single point in time going back with a window of time around it that must be considered when you're deconvoluting the value. Yeah. So we have a much, 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 much higher data density from things like temperature than from single instance events like, say, a hurricane season.
That is true, but you still run into the same thing when you start talking about data that has.
If you're talking about like good data, then yeah, the last you go back before like 1970, and you're talking about pretty bad.
Yes. Well, and there's more to that, right? So the data has a known structure, right? So we have to stratify that data, which means that we have even fewer data points. So we know that the data we sample twice per day. We sample once at the minimum, which is typically around like 6 in the morning, once in the afternoon, which is typically around 3 or 4, and that's supposed to be happening in numerous locations. Well, we know that based on where that temperature station is supposed to be, that is going to have structure. Right. We also know that the data is going to have structure depending on what time of the year it's sampled at. So we control for the day-to-day and we control for the location on the Earth, and that means that we have 2 factors that are limiting the actual number of data points that we have that we can compare. Because we have to basically weight average in these things, and we have to average in the structure for the year, and we have to average in the structure for the location, which means that we have far less data than what we would think we would have if we were to just look at a bunch of random temperature.
The point here being that largely, if we're talking about data density, we have more years. So we have we can either partition it by season, month, day, whatever the hell you want. We can still look at averaging on these things, and we get a much higher data density from temperature, from humidity, from blah 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 blah. The point is that climate doesn't happen on a weather scale. Weather doesn't happen on a climate scale. And when you start confusing these two things, it just gets really frustrating. And then you point out the fact that you'd have to wait such a ridiculous amount of time to tell anything about today, where the problems they're predicting that would happen before that time even arrives. So there really isn't so the whole entire thing becomes a post facto excuse for pushing their own bullshit policy.
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's
I agree with that.
where it arrived from the 1980s when they fucked up the first time and said the whole planet was going to freeze.
Oh, but didn't you know that was only some scientists at that time?
Yeah, it was only some scientists, every single one of them. And yeah, they were wrong and they admitted it, sure, except that some of them are still saying that they weren't wrong. They just had the wrong outcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's
so much better, thank you.
They learned a lot of valuable lessons from psychology. I'm pretty.
Well, they learned a lot of valuable
that.
lessons about how to speak bullshit from politicians. All you have to do is put them out there to say what you're saying, and they can put a big smile and a donor on it.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. Like, it's a ridiculous thing where you start talking about them, and they do have these predictions, and the predictions fail every time. Like, every single time you try to pin them down and you say, okay, I want you to tell me what's going to happen in a reasonable period of time that we can test, right? And they'll give you a timeline that is quote-unquote reasonable, and it's 20, 30 years in the future. And it turns out that 20, 30 years passes, and none of that stuff happened.
Well, look,
right?
We were going to have no Florida in 2010, and clearly that worked out so well for that PowerPoint in 2000. And,
right.
And then, of course, that was supposed to happen again. By the way, we're only, like, four months away from the end of that. We only have 18 months to save the world bullshit.
Yep.
So of course we're going to pass that threshold, and nothing's going to fucking happen.
Yep.
It just boggles my mind. And they're going to say, "Oh, but we had the whole shutdown. We saved the planet by fucking the economy and half the population." Give me a goddamn break. And you know that post facto shit's going to come.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's already like kind of arisen, right? Like,
yeah,
and the crazy part is you start turning around. I know that we have our disagreements on masks and policy and all this stuff, but
sure.
you start talking about things like New York, right? And New York's turning around and arguing. I know that I'm New York centric, right? Forgive me, but Cuomo shoves his fucking dirty dick down my throat all the time. So.
Ew.
Right? Nature of living in why.
It is. It's just part of the process. So Cuomo turned around, and I think it was like June or July or whatever, and he started putting out these ads saying, "We know what works. It's masks." Right? So you're like, okay, well, let's take a look at the data. And what the data ends up showing is that by, I think it was New York's peak was hit in like April 14th through the 20th, somewhere in there. It might have been like April 17th. Sure. Either way, right around that, plus or minus a day or two, right? There's a study that comes out that did serum testing on individuals in New York and found out that it turns out that halfway through, right when we're at peak, 25% of New York had already been infected. You know what that means? That means we hit fucking herd immunity. It's not masks that caused the reduction in actual risk rate. It's because everybody who could be infected got infected, and now there's nobody else who can transmit it. That's what ended up happening in New York.
This is where I have to call bullshit on that. But I'm not gonna get into some diatribe on it right now. I think we can all just agree that Cuomo is a piece of shit.
Yeah, I mean that's just a given.
And if we're talking
in this
policy,
specific regard, mind. I mean, there's all kinds of other reasons he's a piece of shit too, but just specifically about this.
Let alone him and his dipshit brother with a giant novelty swap. Fucking mooks. Anyway. No, so
Cuomo is the most punchable face on television.
As opposed to the kid, right?
Yeah. I remember trying to watch him in the last election cycle. Like, I was trying to watch CNN, and all I wanted to do was just hit him. I don't know why. It was just this unmistakable urge that he just needed it.
It's so hard. Here's the thing, and if for people listening, I wholeheartedly recommend you must go and find news sources that are just that you would think otherwise are trash. Like, imagine, like, I think of CNN as being like the tabloids, except given a shit fuck ton of money for no reason and airport preference.
Accurate.
But I think to me they're a little more than at this point a conspiracy blog with the occasional news item. They're just insane and they're insufferable. But I still end up watching some of the shit that comes out of them on purpose because you've got to watch people you disagree with.
Well, It's like watching a train crash, right? You
there's
just
that
can't
aspect,
look
too.
away. You can't look away. It's going to happen, and it's gonna be bloody, and it's gonna be terrible, and you don't want it to happen.
Like I try not to watch it very often because I like having a low blood pressure, given my proclivity to hypertension. But like when I have to watch them sometimes because I needed to see other perspectives. Because
Yes.
if you start isolating yourself in these fucking echo chambers, you turn into CNN. or Alex Jones, his crowd, or the QAnons. I love QAnon. I got to tell you, I love watching.
You're gonna have to. So I know this is gonna sound terrible, but my only understanding of QAnon was it looked like a random post.
Yeah.
On
Pretty
you know,
much.
like
Right.
right?
Go on.
And it's basically random shit that somebody typed up while stoned and or drunk.
Yeah, it's
Right?
some boomer.
Kind of like
So
that.
what happened is someone shit posted and they called themselves Q, and it was a throwback to like James Bond as a joke, and boomers believed it.
No.
Well, not I mean right away, but it just it
Hard,
kind of
and
went
they
that
got-
same way that stuff does when it hits the chans, and it got
But like, imagine boomers
fun.
going up.
like Q posting was a cool, fun thing to do, and then boomers found it, and
But like, imagine though, a bunch of people, a bunch of boomers found 4chan, and this is the thing they got that's stuck them like flypaper.
No.
Because it's so believable. If you know they're sitting there like everything's post facto justified, and it's like, see this.
I mean, it's like reading Nostradamus,
Yeah,
kind
right?
of.
Like
Yeah.
it's
There you go.
basically a schizophrenic's rant on a page, and then somebody comes in and justifies it with real world events.
Exactly. Trust the plan.
that's QAnon, but it takes
Okay.
the form of evangelical Christianity too, and it is hilarious. Just boomers on YouTube talking about how they're trusting the plan, they believe everything is going to happen, they know Trump is going to
WG 123 G4A.
whatever the fuck that is. Like, trust the plan, everything's going according to plan.
Q predicted this.
Wow.
But it just all you have to do is poke one with a stick on Twitter, and then just watch the friends come in and tell you how you're just some blue wave dipshit. Oh, you young libtards.
I hate to say it, but I've actually gotten sick and tired of poking people with sticks on Twitter. I've had enough of it. I actually have. You realize eventually that you have better things to do.
Yeah.
But like,
True. Well, you always do.
Well, that's what happens. I don't ever worry about ending a discussion on Twitter. If I really care, I'll come back and find it. So if I just if I get bored, I'll just stop. And you can do that, by the way. And I also have like 2,000 people for whatever fucked up reason following me. And I
was trying to figure that out. And I believe it's because you have highly emotional takes, right? The
You
difference
also have
between your content
quite a
and
few
my
emojis
content.
in your username as well. That
Oh,
might
yeah,
have something to do with it.
The major difference between your content and my content, I believe, is roughly equivalent to the number of times you call people a retard. I'm pretty positive that is it is a 1-for-1 correlation there, because I gain subscribers when I do that. I just don't really I get so sick and tired. I'm like, oh yeah, he's retarded. That's a retarded conversation. Nope, don't want to do that one. I already walked down that line.
I've been shitposting on here since 2009. Here's the other thing: is I got to have so much fun being Godfrey that I just didn't give a shit anymore when that all kind of collapsed on us.
What's that?
I was one of the people behind Godfrey Elphick.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing,
are
just by
you?
the way.
By the way.
Really?
By the way.
I didn't really. I thought that was a one-person thing.
No. We were laughing our asses off.
Oh, that's too bad. I would have loved to have been part of that project.
So that shit happened in 2014, and with Tony and me and Lisa and several others. And it was just, because I'm probably the furthest right of all the people that were involved, and I'm fairly center on a lot of things. I'm pretty socially, I'm pretty libertarian on things. Basically just if you're not doing it in my yard, I don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
don't bitch about it to me later.
Oh, so
And
you're
then,
a Wehrmacht super soldier.
Then I'm fiscally conservative. I think you should pay for your own bullshit.
Oh, then definitely a Wehrmacht super soldier.
Yeah, yeah. I'm anything to the right of Mao. Yes. So like I'm fairly. I could say I'm a little more liberal than say my parents are, but that's pretty typical of everybody. So
well, it all depends, right?
I'm the furthest. I'm the only person probably in the group that you could have actually said and not have been totally wrong. That is on the right. Everyone else in there, full on lefty. It's just that they saw this progressive shit come in, and it was too fucking funny.
Well, and that's the thing is you start digging in, right? Like the progressive stuff is crazy. And the liberal stuff, I used to kind of get along with the liberal stuff, and then they started doing purity testing and bouncing everybody out, right? So you be the nuclear engineer in a liberal cabal, and that's not going to happen. You last a very short period of time before somebody tells you how wonderful wind is, and how you should renounce your sins for eating meat.
So Goddard's was a personality that Tony made up as part of a shitpost in Slime Pit. So if you remember the Atheism Plus days and all that kind of stuff.
I do, sadly.
So then you remember Slime Pit as being kind of the counter to that, which was like, hey, you guys are all full of shit. Why are you fucking each other in hotels and bitching about rape? Where did this even come in when we're talking about God not existing? So Slime Pit was the kind of the reaction to the way overbound steps by Atheism Plus. And so Tony is from there.
Rational Wiki.
Yeah, right.
What?
The Rational, dude, if you want to see some funny shit, it's like Conservapedia for libtards.
Conservapedia for libtards. Okay. I think I've run into Rational Wiki once or twice.
It's a gem. An absolute gem.
Really?
You familiar with Reset Era?
So you got to.
So science Reset Era.
I am familiar. There are certain things that I am familiar with. Like I'm familiar with Atheism Plus because all the skeptics that I was interested in talked about it.
Right.
But I came into the internet wars in like 2014 with Gamergate. I came in on that train, and
Science
I didn't even come
Kotaku in action.
It was actually cracked. That's what brought me in because they put whatever her face was. I can't Zoe Quinn or whatever. They put her friggin' article up. And it was so ridiculously nonsensical that I turned around and it flipped every single bullshit switch that I have, right?
Yeah.
Because engineers, right, we're trained. We're not trained to sit there and tell you what is true. We don't know what's true. Nobody knows what's true. But we absolutely 100% can tell you what's false. Just right off the bat. That's the only thing that we're really good at is, nope, that's not going to work, right?
No,
and so she
comes
out here.
Saying it. That's the other thing.
What's that?
We can point a finger and say, nope, that's bullshit.
We get paid to do that, and that's really what our job is to literally say, nope, that's not going to work. Nope, that's not going to happen. If you want this to work, here's what you got to do.
That's, by the way, the entire field of consulting.
Yes, that's really what it is. That's really what it is. So I came in on this, and I'm like, there is no way that you put every single internet buzzword for the last like 6 years into one article of terrible things that have happened to you. There is no way. There has to be another side. It's just not possible that anything like this could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like the girls that get caught and sit there and
the Earth is flat. I don't know what you're talking about.
What's that?
If the Earth is quite flat, excuse you. Nikon Coolpix D9000, hello?
So I came in 2014, right? So I have kind of like, I've gone back in time a little bit, but I didn't actually have the joy of experiencing Atheism Plus. I just got to see everybody bitch about it, and then I got to see them descend into games and watch that whole shit show, and then I got to watch it descend into comics.
Oh yeah,
and then
let me
I
just
kinda,
bust in for a quick second on you guys. I'll see if I can't get Mikaru to come on with us, and we can actually have a real deal talk about Rational Wiki and Atheism Plus.
Oh. But Mike, he got pissed at me before. He like went off deep end.
He's
a
passionate man. He's a very passionate man.
I can appreciate that. I hope he's calmed himself down a bit.
No.
Damn it.
No, he got burned by these people, and the fire burns bright in him.
Yeah.
Okay then.
No, I think it's because I had anything to do whatsoever with Mercedes Carrera, and he just instantly honed in on that.
He does not like that woman.
Oh,
He
are you
hates
kidding
her.
me? Are you kidding me? Like, she and I were actually friends for a good long time. Like
Right.
actual, not no shit. Like, we talked way outside of public domain stuff, and like,
Yeah, we were just talking DMs and shit, right?
yeah, we did. Yeah, we did all the time, and like it got to the point where I think I drew like so I always fence everybody in based on what threat level they could pose, and then I keep them in their little fences, and I nuke them when they cross the fence boundary. And so I let her play outside of the electric fence for a little bit, and then she decided that she wanted to like have Skype conversations. I was like, nope, not gonna happen. I'm a married man. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
You are not coming anywhere near that.
There's a boundary there. I'm sorry.
There's a boundary. And she insisted. I'm like, nope, this was a game. I wanted to see how this would play out, and it played out far better than I thought. And that was the end of the whole entire thing. Like, it was, I felt really bad after I pulled that switch, but then she like went off the deep end, and now she's in prison forever.
Right. Yeah.
With no trial, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's
Actually,
that's a whole completely other
Yeah.
thing. Good God, we've gotten off on a weird tangent, haven't we?
well, I mean, it's kind of rekindling.
August
where we
never
all met
ends.
each other and all that.
Well, what were you
Yeah.
trying to do? Make this a podcast? I thought it was fake.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I mean, we are talking about fake people, so you know, what are you gonna do?
Oh, actually,
She still hasn't gotten trial yet.
Jesus,
That's
really?
that is. Oh, 2 years is kind of around the time, but she's in jail for all that, so that's kind of.
Yeah, like it's no bail, no trial, no nothing.
Yeah,
Well,
right to a speedy trial,
if you're
my
deemed-
ass.
As soon as you're deemed a risk posed to children, it's kind of knee-jerk hair trigger. And that
She
guy's fully-
had to be in
I-
the one conservative alcove in California.
Well, I think, to be fair, right? To be fair, I don't think that's what actually happened. So if you dig into it a little bit, it turns out that her ex-husband was like super hardcore, hyper religious,
Mhm.
And possibly a crazy person.
very likely to be a crazy person. And when you start talking about kids talking to cops, it turns into a shit show very quickly if the cops
Yep.
don't take enormous precautions psychologically, right? Because kids are overwhelmingly willing to please, and especially with an authority figure, like if there's anything that psychology says, it
say,
says
for
that you
instance,
do not have.
You're a director, and you work for Netflix, and you want to tell a story. Kids
Stop,
are
you gotta-
very impressionable.
No.
You're banned from everything.
No,
And
No.
and then Netflix
No.
says go for it.
No.
And,
No.
and
no,
and yeah.
No.
You're going
And
to
then
the
everybody says no. Exactly. Yes. That's what happened. Everybody says no.
we're
You're about to
No.
cross the barrier.
Well,
There's
we
a
already
point
live in a
over there.
society, so I
I'm
mean,
telling you.
whatever.
I'm telling you, Dan, that electric fence light is blinking really far and really, really bright right now.
Oh my god.
Society warning.
Seriously. But yeah, no, so my guess is that actually, like, I the fact that there hasn't been a trial, the fact that there hasn't been any evidence, the fact that there's nothing that's really moved on it in any way really makes me think that it probably wasn't as severe as it was originally chalked up to be. But
Well,
she
it's
just
like-
happens to be in the right circle of everybody hates her. So
Or, it could also be that. It could also. Oh my god. It could also be that like she's basically taken one for the. Oh, she's being made an example of.
and that's true
a
too.
very real possibility. I mean,
Like,
like I
I
said,
think
she was.
you have to put
I'm
a
pretty sure
thing
she
on it.
was living in like the one conservative alcove that's in that area of California at all. So I mean,
Actually,
of course they're going to
so
make a
if you
example
talk
of
to a lot of folks who are from California, the majority of the state land-wise is actually pretty conservative. The problem is that it's like LA and the San Francisco Bay Area has almost all of the population.
Well, yeah, I
Pretty
think she was somewhere around that area, and there's like 2 places in and around LA and just fucking SoCal in general where conservatives can be, and they aren't hunted
Yep.
like rabid dogs.
Yep.
I'm looking at my. So I got kicked off Skype a while ago. with an account I had for a long time, and I'm just looking through some of the stuff that I had sent. Oof. Or not sent, but like was sent to me as part of the groups I was in. It's just some
Oh,
gems.
really?
Just some gems here.
So are you
yeah.
part of Titanium McGrath?
No, that's all Andrew Doyle.
Oh, okay.
He actually wasn't even part of Goddard's.
What is that?
That is hilarious, is what that is. You remember the one where he? You remember the end of the Cell games, right? Where he took him.
The what?
You remember the end of the Cell games, the saga, when he took him to elsewhere to save everyone?
No, I don't.
Well, that's the joke being implied here.
Got it.
Because he decided to explode himself to take out the Earth, and then Goku took one for the team, so to speak.
Oh, that's a fucking Dragon Ball Z deep cut right there. Jesus.
Yeah,
Spoilers, man. Goodness gracious.
My entire experience with Dragon Ball Z was, I think I spent a week with my grandparents, and it was on a Dragon Ball Z marathon on Cartoon Network. And I think by the end of the week, he still hadn't finished charging up.
Yeah,
right?
That's absolutely accurate.
I think it was like this one supercharge up that he had to go to beat Vegetable or whatever his name is, right?
It was vegetarian.
No, that is a great euphemism for the entire thing too. He went and he beat Vegetable.
And it literally like it extended beyond the end of one season, because they did the whole like trailer for the next season that they did, and it went into the next season and he still hadn't finished charging up. Like somehow Goku was never done.
So the funny thing is, the show goes by season.
Jesus, we're under attack.
I'm sorry, that was me killing a bottle. Don't worry, we're all safe now. So it's funny, the way that it works in that show is it doesn't just go by season, it also goes by saga. So like by thematic thing that's happening. So the Cell saga is one thing, the thing where Vegeta arrives to Earth the first time, that's its own thing.
Shall we open up another can of worms with the Brawly saga?
There you go. So those
voice actor, and anyway.
Yeah, we're not going to go ahead and talk about Bulma being a huge cunt in reality.
This is way too much Dragon Ball Z for me.
I mean, we're doing deep cuts. We might as well cut as deep as we can, right?
Yeah, go right ahead. I have no knowledge of Dragon Ball Z outside of that 1 week.
She's one of the women on the Earth that probably deserves to have a female circumcision done.
In Minecraft.
In Minecraft, yes. And when I say deserves, I mean like has done things in life that actually do warrant having physical damage done to a person in Minecraft.
Yeah, or to receive the fullest extent of
maybe
Fortnite.
Maybe Fortnite.
Possibly
because Hassan is just a huge dick in his own mind, but not in reality. Now that I've completely killed that momentum.
Yeah, straight into.
Y'all want to know who did that? Just want to make sure everybody's got that. That I was the one who fucked up. Now that we've done that, we can continue on with what was it we were talking about before? The Electric Universe, right?
Yeah, I think we were somewhere around there. I'm pretty sure we actually had some show topics at one point, but
do we want to talk about COVID?
No, I don't want to talk about COVID anymore.
Yeah, it's still a thing. COVID. Oh, I do actually have one thing I do want to say about that. The AstraZeneca test has been resumed after going through some safety concerns. So
it was a standard procedure for stopping the test to assess the individuals who are having potential difficulties.
Yeah, so
that happens always, regardless whether or not it's published on. That always happens. If somebody has a thing that could either be a reaction, an adverse reaction, or something else that's going on, could be an external interference, like having a secondary infection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, dude could have just totally caught something else.
Yeah, because they're not like in the lab the whole time; they come back. So they wanted to make sure that people weren't having problems.
Now, is that the one that's testing live virus or no?
This one, the AZD 1222. It's a weekend version of the adenovirus that's been engineered code for the spikes on COVID-19.
Yeah. So they're using a standard model that they coded with the protein residue. so they can try to get a reaction to the protein residue, because the human body is very good at reacting nicely to the adenovirus. So without sensitization is really the concern there.
Yeah, basically it's trying to get your body to recognize that configuration of cell.
Yeah.
Okay. Biotech is one of those things that it's really interesting, and there was a time that I was really good with it, and it has faded.
So here's something
you can't get into that without a PhD.
So here's something that can make it really seem this is oversimplified by a long shot, but it's more or less captures the idea. The body's pretty good at recognizing adenovirus, and it's also pretty good at recognizing this kind of test bed strain of it, weakened as it is. And what the body also can do is recognize things that are on this thing it already recognizes as being new, and then attack that specifically. So you can kind of train the immune system in that way. With these kind of manufactured weakened substrates, so to speak. So what you do is you decorate it with the other stuff that resembles the thing you don't want your body to let go through, and then the immune system will generate new antibodies for that as well. So that's kind of the idea. Now, what you don't want is that sensitization issue. You don't want to have that enhancement effect,
which can lead to kind of the cytokine storm that is killing so many people.
That's precisely what they don't want to do. That's exactly why they decided to halt the test and reassess the individual. So I don't know what kind of dosing schedule they're using, or if they did like a one shot and done thing like you do with the flu vaccine, or if they're doing a multi-shot thing, or if they're just kind of doing multi-sampling even.
Yeah, they're not really clear on that.
So I think the real test for the vaccine is going to see what happens if Trump endorses it.
I don't think we need to wonder what will happen there. We're going to see a lot of anti-vaxxers.
So happy. It would make me so happy.
No, we already saw this. 50% of the country went anti-vaxxer overnight about a month ago because he said things are going okay. And they said, well, remember Russia comes out and they decide to register their vaccine before testing it?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to trust a vaccine that hasn't been tested yet, but I at least know what needs to be done for a test. A lot of people just decided outright that they're not going to have anything to do with it because Trump said it was a good idea. It's like, well, it hasn't been tested enough. It's like, well, you were just saying you needed a vaccine. Yeah, but it's too soon. It's like, okay, well, how do you know? You don't like I'm not a virologist, and I know that I need to wait about 12 months for a vaccine to come out because you need to have about that long to make sure you don't have an enhancement effect. But that's
I was kind of hoping, because they were originally hoping that they were going to produce a vaccine by June. There was some Australian labs that thought they had a rapid development test out there for it.
So here's the thing. You also have to realize that
technically we've got a number of vaccines right now.
Yeah, we just don't know
in purely technical terms. We have a number of vaccines that look really good. Like probably could work. But, and there's a big but.
So here's the thing, is we've also been working on coronavirus vaccines for humans to try to tackle this one for the last 25 years. So when people say, oh, but it takes like years to do blah, blah, okay. But we have 25 years before the start of this thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure in place to actually kind of deal with this. As a matter of fact, we had talked previously about a phage that's been modified to actually specifically target SARS, which is completely out of its wheelhouse. We're doing some really amazingly novel things.
I mean, when you start talking about biotech and the biotech pipeline, 90% of the biotech pipeline is stuff that's R&D'd and being modified to be used into its former use, right? The actual, as we go along with biotech will get cheaper. It's in the earliest phases right now, especially when you start talking about the fact that sequencing machines didn't really come out until the early 90s. But when we got good sequencing machines, we completed the Human Genome Project, 25, 30 years ahead of schedule?
Well, yeah, Craig Ventnor's his project suddenly leapt forward.
Right. So when you start talking about this, it doesn't surprise me that we're getting a vaccine within a relatively short period of time. I also know that it wouldn't surprise me if it took 5 years, but it's also not going to surprise me if it takes 12 months.
So the thing is, 12 months is basically how long it should take to test the vaccine. Making the vaccine itself We've already got a variety of them, and there's a lot of them actually already that seem to have promise, which is good. But yeah, I think it was nuts how when Russia decided to register their vaccine prior to testing, which is not something that the U.S. does, by the way. That's the reason why it was weird for us to see that. And it was funny that everyone's touting it's like the first one registered, blah blah blah. It's like, well, we could have registered ours, but we would have also had to say the same way Russia had to. We hadn't tested it yet, which we're not going to do as a country because we're not stupid. So.
Now we are very stupid.
We're not that
We're
stupid.
just not that stupid.
There we go.
Yes.
Keep me honest on that shit. But like, it just look at it, like he's basically made half the country at this point into the anti-vaxxers that everyone and their fucking mother-in-law were ready to hate on just prior to the whole pandemic erupting.
Literally 1 year ago.
Anti-vaxxers are stupid, and like there's a lot of them that are smart, but you don't have to be ignorant to be stupid. You can be very smart and very stupid.
Well, I mean, like when it comes to vaccines, I have a range of responses, right? So when you talk about your MMRs and some of the other stuff, your childhood vaccines, I entirely 100% support that. But in general, I won't go get the flu vaccine every year because A, it's like a 50% or less chance that it's actually going to be the real vaccine, and B, the immunity that you get is less significant than what you would get otherwise.
So like I said, there's a difference between that measured response and I saw that kid get autism in front of my eyes.
I love that one. That's my favorite.
God, that guy is so dumb.
Oh.
And or Jenny McDipshit who decided that her kid didn't have autism anymore because she cured it with her diet.
I mean, actually, it wouldn't surprise me if milder cases you can probably correct with appropriate diet, exercise, and like whatever, but certainly not severe cases.
Here's the other thing about that, though. The reason why we had a rise in prevalence and not incidence is because we expanded the definition. If you define more people to have autism, more people are going to have autism.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that long ago, right? So I was diagnosed a long time ago with Asperger's, which is technically autism, but then they rolled all that shit in, so now I'd technically be autistic. And you're like, wait, what the fuck are you talking about? Right. No, it's a completely different thing. I am functional as a human being. I can operate in modern society. I just have a tendency to piss a lot of people off while I do it.
Right, so this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And like so like I said, there's a difference between a measured response to the idea of vaccination, and then, well, if we eat peaches, somehow things are going to be better.
Right.
So, that whole thing there, and come back and look at the way that vaccines right now are going to be an issue. We have so dumbed things down that instead of that level of stupidity being the threshold for my kids not getting vaccinated, it's now, well, Trump said it's a good idea.
Yeah, that's really quite something.
You know what? I actually don't. I'm not opposed to him sitting there and coming out and endorsing the vaccine, because then we can let natural selection take its place, right? Like, I would be okay with that. That would be a great thing. Trump should come out and start endorsing like all the medications that we've ever produced, and that way we can wipe out a good portion of the people who are just too stupid.
So here's where I have a problem with that. There's a specific side of that morality that you're missing out on here. Aside from just, if we objectively admit the Machiavellian nature of it, which, by the way, I fully appreciate, you have to include the people who are actually protected by herd immunity, who are legitimately should just actually be able to fall into that branch of natural selection and not the one where they just die. So, for instance, there are people out there who are immunocompromised, cannot be vaccinated, or whose bodies just simply do not respond to vaccines.
And they have to be around these awful people.
Right. Well, for one, they have to be around these awful people anyway, and in that sense, if they're stuck there, you might as well just end their lives. But if we're going to go ahead and go on with the idea of having a functional population that's still going to exist at the end, then we should also consider the fact that maybe they deserve to live.
Well, I mean, I understand.
Sometimes,
But I get that. I get that. But think of all the bathwater that you get to throw out if you sacrifice a few babies.
Look, all right, King Solomon.
Like there goes.
I think you're going a little bit deep on the pragmatism here.
Look, King Solomon, you can have your half baby if I get to keep the whole baby. All right.
Okay. All right. I just want a few for snacks.
Look, if that bathwater has like Gatorade in it already, like maybe, you can make.
You know what? I think it's got 5G in it. I think it's 5G.
Does it have 5G and oxygen in it?
Oh yes, the notorious 5G oxygen bathwater. If I bottle that and sell it, I imagine it would cure Corona.
Just get that Dell, whatever the fuck her name is, lady to sit in it for a little while.
Yeah, but that's not going to be 5G oxygenated bathwater. Oh, are you talking on top of that?
Yeah, on top of that. You want to make
okay, so it'd be like have some sort of holy aura, and I don't mean holy as in religious.
Mm.
Well, it certainly would give you
more of a holy miasma, I should say, as opposed to aura.
All I have to say to this is I see all the feminists bitching all the time, and all I sit there and do is go, oh my god, if I was a chick, I could monetize the shit out of my body, and it would be great. My student loans would be paid for. I would have been a stripper till I was like 32. It would have been great.
God.
It's
that's so the wrong method.
It kind of is, and I will say this: I actually worked at a strip club. I was a DJ there, so it takes a particular kind of woman to work in a strip club, and there's like 3 kinds. You've got exactly what you expect, which I don't think I need to go into any more detail with that. Other than that, somebody that has a good body, and that's all. Then you've got the down on her luck, which that can go any number of ways. From down on her luck body, to down on her luck mind, to down on her luck life, to down on her luck society, what have you. And then you have the smart girls. And those get divided. And there's very few of those.
I am presuming in my monetization strategy that I fall into that latter category.
Eve is a smart girl.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm gonna presume that's the case because
we'll run with
if I realize
get your shirt's monogrammed with it, man.
Bathwater, I would be making so much money, but nobody wants my bathwater. Nobody wants 35-year-old engineering male bathwater. That is not something that anybody wants.
You're not marketing it right. It's all in the framing, dude. You've got to. You're totally downselling yourself when you should be upselling. You're an engineer, man. Engineer a solution to this.
That's true. I'll have to convince my wife that she needs to get on the marketing for my bathwater.
My bathwater.
Endorsed by women. There it is already. See, now you're thinking with your engineering mind. Problems have solutions, my friend.
I'd be counting my profits in the pennies per. I'd lose more money on shipping. Let's be honest.
You will make pico dollars, sir.
Look. You're also looking at here as a distribution issue. What you have to do is tell them that you're piping it directly into their house through their faucet.
There you go. Well, I mean, after all, all of my bath water goes through the water cycle, so some of their water is some of my bath water.
So really, they should already be paying you, yes.
They should. That should.
Yes. I mean, really, think of all the licensing money you're missing out on right now.
Go full on Jerry Falwell here, and make sure that they know that they can only get away with doing this so long before you find out about their sins.
Oh my god.
I don't even know how far out of field we've gotten with this.
Well, so far we're into how we can monetize my body as a 35-year-old engineering male, and that's a pretty good place to be. I like this place. This is good.
Well, I mean, it's good for you. What is it they say? Make that Skrilla.
I mean, I really would, though.
Skeet,
like,
skeet.
you start sitting there, you talk to girls, and they're like, oh, yeah, I did this. I got paid. I remember being in my engineering classes, and you get the girls who would go out and, like, hawk Bacardi rum at a college party or something like that. They're getting paid $60 an hour. I'm like, well, I chose the wrong gender when my soul was assigned. This is unfortunate.
God, you're just reminding me of being back in college now. Fucking hell.
It's true. It's true. You know it's true.
That's the thing is, I played lacrosse here, so I had these people show up at parties.
And they were getting paid $60 an hour.
Yeah, I didn't know that part. All I knew was a hot woman came up to me with free shots out of nowhere and said, "Hey, you want some of this?" I'm like, "Well, yeah."
Well, so I've never had a problem talking to women, so I've always been comfortable around them. So they reveal all this shit to me, and that's what you end up finding out is that they make the women who they just have to put a small amount of effort into their personal like appearance. And a lot of them only do it on the weekend because then they look like engineers during the rest of the week, and nobody has an interest in that. But yeah, so they get paid like $60 an hour to go do it. And here I was like, I thought I was doing awesome, right? Because I'm making like $20 an hour selling phones and like being techie and all that stuff, right? I thought I was doing pretty well. And then you sit there, and you talk to the girls, and they're like, "Oh, you make more in an afternoon than I do in 3 weeks."
Damn.
Damn your male privilege.
Yeah, I know, right? It's kind of that's what I should do. My next life. When we get to upload our brains to a server, I'll just create a female avatar like most of my games, and that's
yeah, where you can gawk around and get free shit. There you go.
Oh man, I have more than one weird story about people online.
I mean, didn't you know that everyone online is a girl, or every girl is a guy, and every guy is like 40?
I tried to explain this to two guys in Perfect World, just because I like watching women walk around. So I make a female avatar, and the guy's like, "Hey, can I carry her around?" I'm like, "No, I'm gonna give you free shit." "Okay, I'm a dude, just so you know." "That's okay. Can I kiss you?" "No." "What the hell? No?" "Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you this free shit." "Okay, but I mean, I'm a dude, just so you know."
I remember having a few avatars, right? So most of my avatars are women. I think I've got like a handful of men avatars. Every once in a while, I feel like I'm going to learn how to be the tank in an MMO, and then I realize I hate being the person whose sole job is to get beat every day, all day long, and he doesn't contribute any functional role to the game or the party. Those are my only male characters. And then I have like everything's a female character, and I've been with my wife now for 14 years. So we've been together for a long time, and every once in a while she comes in and she looks over at like the female avatar that I have, and she's like, "Is that what you want me to look like?" I'm like, "No."
You know what? Goes, I mean, I would just start saying yes at it to be an asshole. But...
Well, I thought about that. Then I was playing like Guild Wars 2, right? And so they have the plant people.
Right.
And I thought it'd be really cool to start with like a red plant person. And then as is always the case when it comes to like choosing your color schemes and these things, I give up halfway through because I'm much more interested in playing the game than character creation. So she comes in and she sees like this red and purple and green. She's like, "That what you want me to look like?" I'm like, "No, I just gave up halfway through character creation. I just want to look at tits and an ass walk by. Like, that's all I want."
Funny how simple we can be sometimes.
Well,
they know it. My wife absolutely knows.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's amazing how often a normal person is attracted to that.
Partner. They all are. They have a tendency to prefer men to be men. Because at the end of the day, if you are trying to date somebody, right? Do you want to be a person who has them sitting there and like sobbing at your feet over their privilege? Or do you want somebody to be like, "Man, girl, you look good. Let's go." Right? Like, I wouldn't want my wife sitting there and staring at other people, certainly. And I certainly wouldn't want her not staring at me. So, yeah, I kind of want the same thing that women do.
It's very normal.
Yeah.
Equal rights. Boy, we really went down a rabbit hole on that one. So we kind of touched on the COVID thing, which is really all I wanted to do because that's just kind of a worthwhile update.
Go here, and then I can paste this thing, and then you can have this too. There you go. Here are numbers.
Oh, what do we got? Oh, yeah, the recent updates. Right on.
Oh,
Now, here's one I would love for you guys to see. I think I may have posted it in here earlier. I may not, but I'm absolutely going to post it again because it's the Benadryl challenge.
no,
That's
bad.
Okay,
yes.
First off, TikTok, so that means they should all be dead anyway.
Again, natural selection. I don't know how many times I have to say this.
One so far.
Okay, we're gonna go for 2. I am a big fan of Darwin's theory, and I think that we are good to go.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just read this here. Blah blah. Already killed one teen, sent others to the ER. All right.
Yes.
One 15-year-old girl suffered a fatal overdose. Dumbass. Circulating blah blah encourages users to overdose on the drug to achieve. Okay, so it's diphenhydramine.
Mm-hmm.
You can take like hundreds of milligrams of this shit without dying. So she had to have chugged a fuck ton of this stuff.
Well, there's 2 problems to it, right?
Well, you take more, you get off more. Duh.
The challenge is to take enough so you hallucinate. The problem is diphenhydramine is not a hallucinogen.
Well, so here's the thing. It does cause hallucination due to basically due to how tired you are. We'll put it like that. There's complications I'm not going to get into here. Suffice to say that it's a deliriant. So you will become delirious, and in your delirious state, your brain goes, "What the fuck is a wall? Oh, let's make it a swirl." So, in that sense, yeah, there's hallucination going on.
Yeah.
So that's
it's psychoactive.
So that's Don't do this. It's a frightfully, horrifyingly bad idea.
Yes, it'll also destroy your liver, by the way. So
that also, yes.
Definitely going to do that. So, diphenhydramine, it has a massive hangover for the next day. So if you do take it to do something dumb, you're going to be useless for a long period of time. And it will eventually destroy your liver if you do that. Everyone's going to know you're the dumbass with the red teeth here. So, so you will be remembered as that moron who was found on the toilet with red teeth and piss everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you don't want that on you.
Yeah, so it can be very bad. It only takes a few hundred milligrams to go really, really, really bad on you, even though your body can tolerate probably a couple hundred milligrams of this stuff. So, like 250 milligrams or whatever is probably going to be around the point which you're going to go from having a particularly weird ass day to having a particularly shitty day.
And by shitty day, we could very well mean your last day.
Yeah, if for instance, not being able to make competent decisions like should I throw up in order to get rid of the rest of the shit in me, or should I breathe when I do throw up?
Let me pull up. What's the LD50?
It's pretty high. So the therapeutic index on diphenhydramine is pretty good. It's pretty significant.
Okay.
But the problem is that all of that whole being tired and then possibly aspirating your own vomit.
LD50 is 164 milligrams per kilogram.
Yeah, it's huge.
Or actually, that's for a mouse. For a rat, it's 500 milligrams per kilogram, and rats tend to be a much better biological proxy. So we're probably looking at the average human is about 100 kilograms. So you're looking at having to down something on the order of 50,000 or 50,000 milligrams.
For sake of safety index here, let's just go ahead and cut a 0 off the end of that. And you're still looking at an inordinate amount of this shit you'd have to chug.
You really are. Like
that's what I was saying. She had to have had other complications going on, and my guess is that it boiled down to respiratory arrest, probably after vomiting.
Every single time that something happens, it's almost always
okay. Yeah, just like saying cardiac arrest is always part of death too.
Right.
So what I'm saying here is that she probably just
9 times out of 10, if you're talking about a drug overdose, it's going to be a respiratory arrest followed by a cardiac arrest.
Sure.
Like that's just the progression because your brain stops again to breathe before your heart stops beating.
So again, the main issue here is probably that there is either a cessation of breathing and just in general body overheat, or aspirating their own vomit. So yeah, and they even pointed down out here: delirium, feeling like spinning, hyperawareness, blah 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 blah. It's all the same shit. And yeah, if people have been taking cough medicine or allergy drugs or sleep aids, etc., and just staying awake for those, because it's the same stuff, by the way. People have been doing this shit since these things arrived in the markets back in like the 60s. So everybody knows these are effects. There is no challenge to this. It's just some dumbass wanted to get high. Like, that's what this was. It was some dipshit high on TikTok, and everyone went, "Oh, I want to do that too." Calling it a challenge is not going to help. And
it makes it even worse.
Telling a bunch of parents to be overprotective and keep the shit from their kids is not going to help either. So, if if you have the shit around the house, one, you should already know if your kid's sick. Pay attention, parents. And two, like, your kids should know that no matter what they do, you're gonna love them, and that if they touch the shit in the way they're not supposed to, you're gonna beat them.
Yeah, that is kind of an important thing. I'm not a parent myself, but I will say it's very important that you beat your kids.
Like, you could be loving about it.
Okay. So that does come off a little bit bad. Okay, so capital punishment with your children in the frame of reference of a family situation and not
capital
violence
punishment?
And
Are
abuse.
you sure you want to run the capital punishment line?
That's why I say in the family situation, spankings
I think you're looking
and
for
such.
corporal punishment.
Am I?
Yeah, because corporal punishment is beating them. Capital punishment is executing your children.
Okay, well, not.
That's
we will decimate the children. God damn it!
Like I'm okay. I'm okay with natural selection, but
speaking of survival,
yourself is a little bit too far.
We will decimate the damn children. 9 will be left, and they will be stronger for it.
Hey, they get to learn from the one who didn't survive.
That's right. Morale will improve, or someone else gets shot. Those are good family ethics right there. Good family ethics.
Listen, Johnny. Do you remember Timmy? No, you don't. Timmy was your little brother, and then he took too much diphenhydramine. And we had to put him down.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, don't do Benadryl. Unless, you're taking a reasonable amount. If you have to do something, maybe, I don't know, Robitussin? At least that's not going to kill you.
It's the same shit, dude.
It
yeah,
is.
But it's not going to kill you as dead, and you're not going to take
There are so many better drugs.
Yes, there really are.
Take to induce hallucinogenic effects.
God, have some gas or something.
No, that's bad. No, here's what you do, kids. Nothing. Or go run. Run until you can't stop, till you can't walk any further. Your body produces its own morphine.
Or there's drugs. Very effective drugs.
Anyway, so the point here is that, yeah, kids, if you chug a bottle of this shit, make sure you stop at 1, because otherwise you're going to be the moron on the front page news. And you don't go down as a legend, you go down as that dumbass.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what that is.
Nobody's going to think the person was smart at the end of the day.
They must be doing more than, I'm guessing, I know that the image there is the bottle, but there's no way that you're getting that kind of dose rate off a bottle, because that's only 12.5 milligrams per dose. Yeah. And so if you're talking about hitting LD50s of 500 milligrams per kilogram or 50,000, you got to be chugging a bottle of the pills.
Like I said, you just for safety margin on this thing, especially given we're talking about a model scale up here, just cut a 0 off the end, and you still have to chug 10 or 20 of these bottles.
Yeah.
So, I said, that's probably some defect that was going on there. There's probably some either a liver defect or they aspirated vomit. And that is more likely to be the problem here instead of the actual drug in this case, because diphenhydramine is very safe.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of concerned parents out there with kids who are going to get a common cold or the flu, not COVID, and they're going to freak out because they think their kid's going to give them the fucking modern plague, and it's just going to be a catastrophe because morons on TikTok are chugging bottles of a fucking deliriant.
I don't know how widespread this is though, right? That's
if it made MedExpress, it's probably not terribly widespread yet. As soon as it hits Fox News or fucking CNN, then you're gonna know it's gonna spread, because these things always precede spread. There's these panics have never actually come after the problem has existed.
Oh, no, they exasperate it.
This is probably 10 kids.
The problems. You make the thing famous, and everybody's like, "I gotta get in on that fame train."
there's 10 kids on TikTok, and 3 of them already, or 4 of them have fucked up, and one of them enough to the point where they died.
You know what's weird though? Like, I don't remember ever doing this as like a teenager. I don't remember sitting there and saying, "Hey, let's go into my medicine cabinet and down as many pills as I can." We did other stupid shit. That's absolutely like the natural rite of passage. But it's like, eat this weird thing and I'll give you $1. Well, here's not like.
There's one called Jinkum from back when I was in fucking middle school, so probably about the same time you were in middle school.
Yeah.
There's a great one that came out on the internet, and this is all bullshit, by the way. And if anybody actually did do it, that was really the fun. They were kind of the butt of the joke. Jinkum was fermented human sewage. That was the whole joke of it. So the idea was that you would huff the gases that come off of it. You put a balloon on a jar of basically shit from the toilet.
Yeah.
And let it go for a while, and then see if someone was going to be dumb enough to fucking huff it. Now, did anybody actually do this? Certainly. Did anybody I knew did it? No.
Right.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this.
I do actually remember. As soon as you explained it, I remember it.
It had a different name, I'm certain, everywhere. But where I am, it was called Jinkum. And it was hilarious because people are like, "Oh, dude, you gonna try this?" And you always have the one dipshit in the group. It's like, "Yeah, dude, I already did it." It's like, "All right, prove it." Like, "No, I can't."
Or the what's the classic? Nutmeg or banana peels.
So mace would be the just the skin of the nutmeg, but it's the same thing.
Oh,
the better one was when someone finds out that mace is the skin of nutmeg and then goes and tries to use mace spray, which of course is just capsaicin spray, which of course totally doesn't work. Not actually. Let me just put it like this: it does work in one way. It definitely gets you excited.
It does. It certainly does. And if you like your food spicy, there you go.
You know what? I as an individual who is a connoisseur of buffalo wings, I assure you that the women folk are not a particular fan of evening activities after buffalo wing night. It has ruined many an evening.
That really does. There's the fire and ice packaging out there.
Yeah.
There is.
It certainly would bring some spiciness to activities.
Yeah,
it would.
It
and
really
some
does.
Swelling.
It heats things up in the bedroom, you could say. It really does.
It doesn't tear.
Oh, boy, we really.
I probably heat things up in divorce court.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh,
all right. Oh, how many hours have we got in?
Oh, we're well in for the night. We got about 2 hours of stuff here. I mean, we could.
Say, are we a two-parter, or this will be a long one?
No, I'd say we've got enough to keep people entertained and incredibly confused if they've made it this far. So why don't we go ahead and just wrap it up and.
Okay.
No, we'll be back again next week or sooner. Who the hell knows? Thanks for tuning in.
Have a good night.
See ya.